keep us dry, and keep our animals safe and dry. And Lord, help us to realize tonight as we're up here making decisions on behalf of the city, the decisions we make, that you're the ultimate authority for all decisions, and that we need to respect that authority. And just thank you, Lord, for everything you've done for us. Help us to always keep you as our guide in how we would like to live our lives. In Jesus' name we pray. Amen.
Amen.
Okay, I'd like to call the regular meeting of the Milton City Council for Monday, September 21st, 2009 to order. Will the city clerk please call the roll and make general announcements?
Good evening, Mayor and Council. I'll be happy to call roll for the September 21st, 2009 regular meeting. However, I'd like to remind those in the audience to please silence all cell phones at this time. Additionally, those attending the meeting who would like to provide public comment either during the public hearing or during the call for public comment, we do require that you complete a public comment card prior to speaking on that item. There is no public comment for consent agenda items or items under first presentation. Those called to speak will be taken in the order that the speaker cards were received by City Clerk staff prior to the meeting. All speakers will identify themselves by name, address, and organization if applicable. When you hear the bell, you'll have 30 seconds to complete your remarks. The City Council may allow public comment on either an agenda item or general public comment from a representative of such an organized group or association, provided, however, that such an individual shall file a notarized affidavit that they have the authority to speak on behalf of said organization. Demonstration of any sort within the chamber is prohibited, so please refrain from any applause, cheering, booing, outbursts, or dialogue with any person speaking. Please show the same respect to the person speaking that you would expect to receive yourself. As I call roll, please confirm your attendance. Mayor Joe Lockwood.
Here.
Councilmember Karen Thurman.
Here.
Councilmember Julie Zonner Bailey.
Here.
Councilmember Bill Lusk.
Here.
Councilmember Bert Hewitt.
Here.
Councilmember Tina D'Aversa.
Here.
Councilmember Alan Tart.
Here.
Would everyone please rise for the Pledge of Allegiance?
And I want to ask Scout here, Brett Ball, if he would step up. I think Councilmember Bailey had talked to him.
Yes, thank you, Brett. Come up and join us.
Come up and lead us in pledge.
Brett is getting one of his badges and wanted to be with us this evening, so we are honored with his presence.
Come on in, Brett. How are you, buddy? You want to lead us in the pledge?
Pledge allegiance to the
with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you very much. Good evening. It's kind of exciting to look out in the audience and see a bunch of baseball players. We're really proud of you guys. Thanks for coming tonight. Will the city clerk please sound our first item?
First item is approval of the meeting agenda, item number 09936.
Any other items to be considered? Not. Do I have a motion and a second?
Mayor, I'll make a motion to approve the agenda as printed.
Second.
Motion by Councilmember D'Aversa, second by Councilmember Tart. Is there any discussion? Hearing none.
All those in favor of the motion, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? That's unanimous.
Okay, next item is public comment. Public comment is a time for citizens to share information with the mayor and the city council and to provide input on and opinions on any matter that is not scheduled for its own public hearing during today's meeting. There's no discussion on items on the consent agenda or first presentation from the public or the council. Each citizen who chooses to participate in public comment must complete a comment card and submit it to the city clerk. Please remember this is not a time to engage the mayor or members of the city council in conversation. When your name is called, please come forward and speak into the microphone stating your name and address for the record. You'll have 5 minutes for remarks. Do we have any general public comment?
No, sir, not general public comment.
Okay. I'll move on to the consent agenda then. Will the city clerk please sound the item?
First item is item number 09937, approval of the September 9th, 2009 regular meeting minutes. Second item is approval of the financial statements for the period ending August 2009, item number 09938.
Okay, do I have a motion and a second to approve the
Mayor, I'll make a motion that we approve the consent agenda, including agenda items number 09937 and number 09938.
I'll second the motion.
I have A motion by Councilmember Diaversa, second by Councilmember Bailey.
All those in favor of the motion, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? That's unanimous.
Okay, we're going to move on to reports and presentations. Will the city clerk please sound the next item?
A proclamation designating October as Crime Prevention Month. This is presented by Council Members Tina Diaversa and Alan Tart.
Good evening. Since 1984, the National Crime Prevention Council designated October a Crime Prevention Month. Every year since then, governmental agencies and civic groups, schools, businesses, churches, youth organizations have all reached out to educate the public and showcase their accomplishments and explore new partnerships during the special month. Part of the month is also to raise awareness about crime prevention and important issues such as victimization, volunteerism, and creating safer, more caring communities. Whereas the vitality of our city depends on how safe we keep our homes, neighborhoods, schools, workplaces, and communities. Whereas crime and fear of crime destroy our trust in others and in civic institutions, threatening the community's health, prosperity, and quality of life. Whereas people of all ages must be aware of what they do to prevent themselves and their families, neighbors, and coworkers from being harmed by crime. Whereas people of all ages must be made aware of the dangers of crime and how they can protect themselves and from becoming victims. Whereas the personal injury, financial loss, and community deterioration resulting from crime are intolerable and require investment from the whole community.
And whereas crime prevention initiatives must include self-protection and security, but they must go beyond these to promote collaborative efforts to make neighborhoods safer for all ages and to develop positive opportunities for young people. Whereas adults must invest time, resources, and policy support in effective prevention and intervention strategies for youth and adults, and must make sure to engage teens in programs to drive crime from their communities. Whereas effective crime prevention programs succeed because of partnerships with law enforcement, other government agencies, civic groups, schools, faith communities, businesses, and individuals as they help to nurture communal responsibility and instill pride. Now, therefore, we, the Mayor and City Council of the City of Milton, do hereby proclaim October 2009 as Crime Prevention Month in Milton and urge all citizens, government agencies, public and private institutions, and businesses to invest in the power of prevention and work together to make Milton a safer, stronger, more caring community. Given under the Mayor's hand and seal of the City of Milton, Georgia, on this day, 2009, Mayor Joe Lockwood.
Thank you, Councilmember Tart and Diaversa. Do we have anybody here that would accept this signed proclamation?
I think we'd want to present it to our city manager, since he has been the public safety director for our city since we began. and on behalf of the rest of your staff, if you would accept it, we'd be very appreciative.
You're going to present it to me anyway? All right. Thank you, Chris.
Chris has worn many hats. We appreciate that.
I think that's his proudest thing.
We can also present it to Chris because Mr. Lagerbrink found money in 2010 budget, hopefully, with our approval, to hire a crime prevention officer so that we can have a full-fledged program in the city of Milton and be a leader in forming neighborhood watch programs in the city, which is something that I think we need badly.
And I do want to just commend Chris and all the other staff that have worked so hard. You guys, you don't really think about it, but City of Milton, we got to start up our own brand new police department and fire department under Chris's lead. And just imagine having to go out and pick out brand new police cars and all the radios and all the weapons and fire trucks and all the safety gear. Not too many people get to just start from scratch and start a brand new public safety department. So these guys did a great job, and we really appreciate it. So thanks, Chris. Okay, will the city clerk please sound the next item?
Our next item is a proclamation to honor Caitlin Davies and Heather Kipnis for their charity work in support of Camp Kudzu. Councilmember Karen Thurman.
Thank you. In today's time, where what we usually hear on the news regarding young adults is the problems that they have gotten into, this is a wonderful story of two young girls who decided to do something that benefited a lot of other kids. And Caitlin Davis, along with her best friend Heather Kipnis, put together a softball tournament, and the softball tournament was called Camp Kudzu Classic, and it benefited children with a type 1 diabetes that go to Camp Kudzu. And Heather herself is a type 1 diabetic, and it was through their efforts to got their parents involved, pulled together this wonderful event that would allow other kids to go to this camp. Whereas the special character of the city of Milton is founded not only in its woods and streams and horse pastures, but in the community-oriented outlook of its citizens. And whereas the recognition of the unique needs and travails of friends and neighbors is an important part of developing such a community mindset, even amongst the younger generations of Milton residents. Whereas in June 2009, the true spirit of community was demonstrated by two young softball enthusiasts when their relationship led to a very successful fundraising effort to support Camp Kudzu. And whereas friendship and a recognition of the special needs of diabetic children led to a softball tournament in which 32 teams participated, and the two girls were able to raise $5,000 in support of this worthy cause. And whereas Camp Kudzu is a nonprofit organization providing education, recreation, and peer networking programs for Georgia's children with diabetes. And whereas the people of Milton and the beneficiaries of Camp Kudzu are proud of these two young citizens, their friendship, the strong community bond that brought them together to support those in need. Now, therefore, we, the mayor and city council of the city of Milton, hereby proclaim and applaud Caitlin Davies and Heather Kipnis as exemplary members of the Milton community and of the state of Georgia, and do urge all citizens to join in this celebration. Given under his hand and seal of the city of Milton, Georgia, on the 21st day of September, 2009. Mayor Joe Lockwood.
If Caitlin and Heather could step up.
I'm just going to say very quickly that I've had the privilege of teaching these young ladies, and their enthusiasm for each other, their enthusiasm for life, and who they are as young people is contagious. And to know them here is not to know them in the classroom or in the community. You guys both are awesome. You rock, and just keep it up. Okay, I'm very proud of you.
And I just want to add, I know your parents have got to be proud too, so great job.
And we're getting you one extra copy of the proclamation so you each have your own. So it'll be here in just a minute.
Just a minute.
Okay, does the city clerk please call the next item?
Yes, sir. We have another proclamation for the Sportsman Award for the 2009 Dizzy Dean Tournament. And this will be presented by Councilmember Tina D'Aversa.
And I just want to say something real quick. I had the honor, as along with Councilmember D'Aversa, to go to a little ice cream victory party with these guys. So I had a great time.
No ice cream tonight.
But they're on TV.
I think Uncle Roger said he was buying ice cream tonight, so I'm not sure where he's taking y'all, but, he's here, so just remind him. Thank you guys for being here. Just a little background for everyone here tonight. We've celebrated a little bit, several times actually, these guys honors that they've had. They've represented the city of Milton so proudly, as do all of our young athletes that play baseball throughout the city and other sports throughout the city, and especially at Bell Memorial for the Hopewell Youth Association. We did have an ice cream social, and the mayor and I were lucky enough to be invited to attend over at Quantum Bank, and Mr. Roger Wise here has been a catalyst for the governor's support of this group, as well as making sure that a lot of very important people know of their accomplishments. What they did was they won the Dizzy Dean tournament for the 7 and under for the state, but far more important than just winning that tournament, they won the Sportsmanship Award. And because we feel that sportsmanship is so very vital to our community and to our young people as well as to our adults, and we hope that everyone practices good sportsmanship every day and that they will use these young folks as a role model, we wanted to have a special proclamation for them. So we are naming today Sportsmanship Day for the city of Milton in honor of the Hopewell 7 and under Storm. So let me read this proclamation to you, please. Whereas the city of Milton recognizes that one of the greatest responsibilities one can undertake is the development and nurture of our future generation. And whereas youth sports provide an important forum to instill the values of hard work, perseverance, and good sportsmanship. And in the 2009 season, the 11 boys of the HYA 7 and under Hopewell Storm baseball team demonstrated these qualities as recognized by both their on-field successes and by their conduct during the season. And whereas the talent of the boys was demonstrated in their recognition as the Georgia Dizzy Dean 2009 7 and under District 4 champions, the USSSA 2009 Coach Pitch Georgia State champions, and the USSSA National Boys 7 and under Coach Pitch #1 national champions. And whereas the 7 and under Hopewell Storm boys were recognized most especially by receiving the Sportsman Award for the 2009 Dizzy Dean tournament, demonstrating not only athletic ability but their true and good character. And whereas the city of Milton recognizes the important athletic achievement and the importance of encouraging sportsmanship in our young baseball players. Now therefore, we, the mayor and city council of the city of Milton, hereby proclaim September 21st, 2009 as Hopewell Youth Association's 7 and under Hopewell Storm Sportsmanship Day, and do urge all citizens to join in this celebration, given under the mayor's seal, hand and seal of the city of Milton, Georgia, on the 21st day of September, 2009. Mayor Jay Lockwood.
And I just want to reiterate, guys, how proud of you guys that we are. We're happy to have you in Milton and have you guys out there representing us. So, not sure who I should present this to, but taking a couple times.
Mr. Kipnis, I know that the rain kept you from being here. Before we all go back up, can I ask Mr. Kipnis and Mrs. Kipnis and the girls to come up so we can get a picture with all of us together? I know that the rain kept everybody from getting here, and that's disappointing. Come on, let me get another picture.
Hey, Coach, how'd I come out in the school yesterday?
Still alive.
I know how that feels.
Come on, girls, let's get out of here. Good job. Good job. I've lived in North Park for about 10 years.
We need to get closer. Okay. Yeah. And I want to grab the mayor. Okay. And you guys, please be careful driving out of here now. I understand there's still a lot of challenges out there.
Okay, we're going to move on to our public hearings. Will the city clerk please sound the next item?
It's a public hearing on an ordinance to adopt adjustments to the fiscal 2009 budget for each fund of the City of Milton, Georgia. First public hearing was on September 9, 2009. Ms. Stacy Inglis.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. I'm not going to go into the details of this budget amendment. It was first presented to you on September 9th. Simply going to state that the budget is increasing $32,320. There hasn't been any changes to the numbers itself, but there was a change to the document. The General Administration Department was being split out and reallocated into the separate departments, Finance, HR, IT. But whenever I had my employee put the document together, he lumped in Risk Management and Legal into the Finance Department. And this document that's presented to you tonight splits those out of the Finance Department. So you have the different departments, Finance, HR, Communications, Risk Management, and Legal. So that's the only change to the document. This is simply an end-of-the-year budget adjustment, bringing everything in line with actuals to date.
Okay, is there any public comment on this?
No public comment.
Okay, I'm going to close the public hearing now and then ask if there's any questions from council for Stacy. Okay. The city clerk, please sound the next item.
Second public hearing is on an ordinance to adopt the fiscal 2010 budget for each fund of the City of Milton, Georgia. First public hearing on September 9th. Mr. City Manager?
I'll start this out. I'll just describe some of the changes that were made from the first presentation to you that was done on September 9th. There was an increase in the property tax collections of $15,000 to account for reappropriating funds for the Highway 9 design guidelines. There was an increase in the IT department of $15,120 for the network bandwidth optimization. This initiative was mistakenly entered in as $17,000 when it was initially presented to you. That figure did not include the monthly Metro Ethernet cost, bringing the true cost for this initiative to $32,120. There's a decrease in the municipal court salaries account to bring numbers in line with the actual court sessions that are scheduled for the next fiscal year. I believe I put in too many court sessions because we have solicitors and bailiffs paid on a per session fee. There's an increase in the fire department of $4,000 for the annual cost of medical direction. When we initially put the budget together, we had a figure in there of $25,000. We've since received the actual cost for next year's contract, which is $29,000. There's a decrease in the unallocated account for other financing uses of $14,471. This is basically to offset all the adjustments that I've mentioned above. And there's an increase in the Public Works Department of $75,000 to account for the cost of hiring a consultant to assist us with the possible transition to a self-performing department. And this is offset by a decrease in the funding for the MPDES project in the Capital Projects Fund. Those are all the changes that were made to the document as it was presented to you on September 9th. I'll let you take over.
I think at this point, if we just do the public hearing as it relates to this,
Yeah, we'll just do the public
questions
hearing
when we get to it further in the agenda. We'll have plenty of time to talk about the whole budget document.
Do we have any public comment?
No public comment.
Okay, I'm going to close this public hearing. City clerk, please sound the next item.
Public hearing on an ordinance of the mayor and council of the city of Milton, Georgia to fix the ad valorem tax rate of the city of Milton for fiscal year 2009 and for other purposes. The first public hearing on this item was on September the 21st at 5:45. Ms. Inglis?
Okay. According to the official code of Georgia, 48-5-32, we are required to hold 3 public hearings on the establishment of the millage rate. This is the second public hearing. The first one, as mentioned by Ms. Marchafava, that it was held today at 5:45 p.m. The third would be held next Monday, at September 28th, at 5 o'clock during a special call council meeting. The adoption of the millage rate will then take place after the public hearing on the 28th. According to the city's charter, we are required to use the same billing and due date that Fulton County uses. They are projecting that they'll be able to send bills out by October 15th with a due date of around December 14th. The total tax digest is $131,102,674. Total taxes levied are $10,082,247. Of that, property taxes equals to a little over $9.5 million, with motor vehicle taxes at $546,000. This is a property tax decrease of 2.29% from last year's information, and there is a 4.731 mills that is being presented as the millage rate for this year.
Okay, is there any public comment on this item?
No public comment.
Okay, I'm going to close this public hearing. Any questions from council or staff? Bill?
Stacy, going back to item number 2 on the 2010 budget, you mentioned we're moving $75,000 out of the NPDES budget into consultant fee.
Correct.
Is there still, so that takes it down to what, 425,000?
Yes.
Is that adequate to
I believe it is, and I'll get into it, just be happy to get into a discussion as to what the $75,000 request, even though that's a high number for what I think we would need if we go down the route of a public works consultant. Certainly we have several different options, but also one of the consulting services that that public works person brings to the table is a review of what our NPDES requirements are going to be for the next fiscal year. And that's how I'm comfortable in telling you tonight that I believe taking the $75,000 out of there is still sufficient to meet our needs for 2010.
that was my point. Thank you.
Mayor,
Julie?
because that question had been asked, and I don't know if it'll be this evening or Chris, maybe at our next meeting, if you would address just the rate. One of the questions I had asked at the last work session was just whether or not the hourly rate is commensurate with that fee, and I don't know that we're going to discuss that this evening before we get to a final budget. I think that would be important.
We can, and as we have a discussion tonight about the budget, and as we've had previous ones, I've said and will continue to say that the style that I think is appropriate in working through a budget is to be very conservative. I can tell you that contemplates an hourly contract, and that dollar figure also represents a cushion in there that if you approve the contract, which you haven't seen yet, and you all will have a chance to see it, but it truly is a contract not to exceed $50,000 with some opportunity that should we run into a situation where we have to extend it for unforeseen circumstances or additional work that might be necessary. That is the total dollar cost that contract could, by the way it's written, account for, although as I hope you are comfortable at this point, we manage our dollars very closely. But again, I put in a total dollar cost. I estimate it to be less than that.
So is that a time and material contract?
It is time and material.
Thank you.
Okay, any more questions? Then we'll ask the city clerk to move on to the next item.
Moving to the alcohol beverage license applications, public hearings, approval of an alcohol beverage license application for the Manor Golf and Country Club located at 15952 Manor Club Drive in Milton, Georgia. The applicant is M. Doug Meredith for consumption on the premises of wine, malt beverage, distilled spirits. Item number 09939. Ms. Stacy Inglis.
The applicant is in compliance with all of the state laws and city ordinances. Staff recommends that you approve. Just so you know where this is, they already have an alcohol beverage license for the main clubhouse. This is for the second building that is located right next to the main clubhouse. It's a different address, therefore they have to have a different alcohol beverage license for that.
Do we have any public comment on this?
No public comment.
Okay. Is there any questions for Stacy and Council? Julie?
Stacy, just because this is obviously with proximity to a residential area, can you just comment about the proximity to bus stops and all of those requirements? I believe that it does meet those, but if you could just state that for the record.
I believe there is nothing in the ordinance that states it has to be within a certain distance of a bus stop. It is dealing with schools and churches, and since it is in the middle of a residential area, it is definitely meets those
There's not
distance
a I know
requirements.
that there's a couple of churches close, but it would not meet the requirement, correct?
Correct.
And I know at one point we had a discussion as to whether or not a bus stop was an extension of the school, and I think our city attorney had ruled that it was indeed not. So that's just why I asked the question.
Okay.
I'd like
Also,
to
just to follow up on that, just to let you know this, and I just confirmed that, this is a second request for a license within the same subdivision, within the same clubhouse. So there's already one existing that you all have approved at the manor. This is just a second for a different facility.
I get those questions sometimes from residents that say, does it meet the bus stop issue? Does it meet the school? Does it meet the church? So thank you for that.
Do we have any public comment on this?
No, sir.
Okay. I'm going to close the public hearing. Do I have a motion in a second?
I'll move to approve the alcohol beverage license application for the Manor Golf and Country Club located at 15952 Manor Club Drive, Milton, Georgia. The applicant is M. Doug Meredith for consumption on the premises of wine and malt beverage, distilled spirits. Agenda item number 09939.
I'll second it.
I have a motion by Councilmember Bailey, a second by Councilmember Thurman. Is there any discussion or questions? Hearing none.
All those in favor of the motion, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? That's unanimous.
Okay, will the city clerk please sound the next item?
Approval of alcohol beverage license application for Vintage Pizzeria Milton at LLC, doing business as Vintage Pizzeria, located at 12540 Broadwell Road, Suite 1103, Milton, Georgia. The applicant is Kara Gonzalez for consumption on the premises of wine, malt beverage, distilled spirits. Item number 09940. Ms. Inglis?
This applicant is also in compliance with all the state and city regulations, and staff recommends that approval of this agenda item.
Do you have any public comment on this?
No public comment.
Okay. Any questions from council to Stacy?
Mayor, I'd like to make a motion.
Let me close, excuse me one second. I'll close the public hearing, and now I'll ask for a motion in a second.
A motion to approve the alcohol beverage license application for Vintage Pizza, Milton LLC, doing business at Vintage Pizzeria located at 12540 Broadwell Road, Suite 1103, Milton, Georgia. The applicant is Kara Gonzalez for consumption on the premises of wine, malt beverage, distilled spirits. Agenda item number 09940.
I'll second it.
I have a motion by Councilmember Diaversa, second by Councilmember Thurman.
All those in favor of the motion, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? That's unanimous.
Okay, there's no items under the first presentation. We're going to move on to the zoning agenda. Will the city clerk please read the zoning rules and sound the next item?
At the second regularly scheduled meeting of the month, the mayor and city council consider a zoning agenda. These items include rezoning petitions, modifications of zoning use permits, and associated concurrent variances, in addition to ordinances, resolutions, and text amendments. The petitions will be heard in the sequence listed on the posted agenda. I would like to acquaint you with some of the rules and procedures for this meeting. The applicant and all those speaking in support of an application will be allowed a total of 10 minutes to present the petition. The applicant may choose to save some of the time for rebuttal following the presentation by the opposition. The opposition will be allowed a total of 10 minutes to present its position. If time remains, the opposition will be allowed to rebut. Since the burden of proof is upon the applicant will be allowed to make closing remarks, provided time remains within the allotted time. City clerk staff will be keeping track of the time and will inform you periodically of the remaining time for your presentation. Those called to speak will be taken in the order that the speaker cards were received by city clerk staff prior to tonight's meeting. All speakers will identify themselves by name, address, and organization, if applicable, before beginning their presentation. The Planning Commission heard the rezoning agenda items, and recommendations have been forwarded to the Mayor and City Council for consideration and disposition. In addition, the applicant shall not submit material to the council during the meeting unless requested to do so. When an opponent of a rezoning action has made within 2 years immediately preceding the filing of the rezoning action being opposed, campaign contributions aggregating $250 or more to a local government official of the local government which will consider the application, it shall be the duty of the opponent to file a disclosure with the governing authority of the respective local government at least 5 days prior to the Planning Commission meeting. A violation of the relevant state statute constitutes a misdemeanor. Therefore, if you have contributed $250 or more to a council member and you have not filed a disclosure prior to the Planning Commission meeting, the City Attorney's Office strongly suggests that you have someone else speak on your point of view. Moving to the first item on the zoning agenda, which is ZM09-02, west side of Birmingham Highway at SR 372, land lots 1096, 1098, and 1135. Of the 2nd District, 2nd Section, Brayburn Subdivision by John Whelan Homes and Neighborhoods Incorporated, represented by William Woodson Galloway, Dillard and Galloway. This is a request to modify the following conditions. Number 1, to modify Condition 1D, which currently allows up to 54 townhomes at a maximum density of 0.86 dwelling units per acre to allow up to 38 townhomes at a maximum density of 0.61 dwelling units per acre based on total acreage zone. And number 2, to modify 1E, which currently allows up to 45 single-family residential units at a maximum density of 0.72 dwelling units per acre to allow up to 61 single-family residential units at a maximum density of 0.98 dwelling units per acre based on total acreage zoned. Number 3, to modify the required minimum lot size in Condition 1F from 18,900 square feet such that no more than 15 lots shall have a minimum lot size of 10,890 square feet, approximately 1/4 of an acre, or above. At least 3 lots, lots 11 through 13, shall have a minimum lot size of 1 acre or above, and the remaining lots shall have a minimum lot size of 14,500 square feet, approximately 1/3 of an acre or above. And 4, to modify Condition 2A to replace a revised site plan received by the Fulton County Department of Environment and Community Development on June the 7th, 2006, with the revised site plan received by the City of Milton Community Development on July the 7th, 2009. Number 5, to modify Condition 3E to reduce the 15-foot building separation to a 10-foot building separation with a 5-foot side yard setback for lots less than 1 acre. This is agenda item number 09925, first presentation on September 9th, 2009. Ms. Robin McDonald.
This item, staff's report is to recommend deferral until the October 19, 2009 meeting to allow the applicant to resubmit a revised site plan and legal description to include the entire property that was included in the Z05117 zoning petition.
Okay, do I have any questions of staff first? Then I'll let the applicant speak.
I guess
Julie?
my question was just going to be whether or not staff wanted to comment separate from the advertising that's being requested for deferral. If you wanted to speak to the actual variances that are being requested. I'm accustomed to, even when it's a deferral, there's still a review.
Yeah, from my understanding is the applicant is going to ask for a withdrawal completely of the application, so unless you want me to go into all the details, I don't want to waste anybody's time.
And I guess that was just the first that I heard there was a request for a withdrawal as opposed to a deferral.
I just found out that today as well from Tom Wilson. So.
Okay, so as a matter of order, since it's a request for a deferral, how would our city attorney recommend that we proceed?
How much of a presentation? Well, we can give the whole thing.
I mean, we can't.
My recommendation would be to if the council feels like they need a staff presentation after the applicant speaks, they could do that. But they may want to hear from the applicant very quickly.
Thank you.
Okay. First, we'll hear for those speaking in support of this zoning modification.
Woody Galloway on behalf of the applicant, John Whelan Homes and Neighborhoods. We are requesting that this application be withdrawn. We want to take some time to look at the request in light of some public comment that we have received and evaluate how to proceed. So at this time, we would ask that you allow withdrawal of this request.
Is there anyone in public comment, additional public comment? In
Yes, sir. I have
support?
some in opposition.
In opposition, okay. If we've got all the support, then go ahead with the opposition.
Mr. Jeff Kish.
Good evening. Jeff Kish, 545 Kensington Farms Drive, Milton, Georgia. I know this is being deferred for this evening. However, as this moves forward, I know many of you have been out to my house and the surrounding area and seen the devastation caused by the development behind my house. I want the council to be aware of the ongoing damage that is being caused by the development of John Wieland and John Wieland Homes. Wieland has already come to you and gotten a variance, the conditions of which have not been met, and that's been almost 2 years ago. If they're not willing to meet the conditions of a previous variance, I'm not sure why you should consider any variance going forward. They've allowed the entire development to become overgrown, and I know that they haven't had any development there ongoing, but they're still required to have stabilization in place for the soil. We have continuing erosion control problems on site, and certainly with the rains that we are having here, where they have put in measures or conditions of the development, such as bricking of the walls. The bricking is now coming off. It represents a hazard to anyone around it. It leaks outside through the walls during heavy rain, so water coming through a wall is not really a properly constructed site. I've been in my house for 18 years, and the erosion that we've seen in the last 2 years far exceeds anything we've ever seen before, and it continues certainly on a day like today, where you are seeing high rain, heavy rains and flooding throughout. But without any erosion control measures being put in place, we're not certainly going to see it get better. I know that in the past there's been several work stoppages on the site. I believe 4 by the city, 2 by the state, and 1 by the EPA. Those certainly aren't pointing to the quality of the development and the quality of the standards to which the developer should and must meet in order to be continuing forward. If they're not willing to do what they have in the past, please do not let them move forward and do more destruction to our community and our property. Thank you.
Thank you.
Ms. Laura Longfellow.
Laura Longfellow, 755 Owens Lake Road in Six Hills. And my comments were really more just questions. I can't find the figures anywhere where it has comparison of non-porous surface to, where water could flow through in the porous material. And in comparison, I just see the lot sizes. So due to all this rain and the flooding we have in Six Hills, which has all the water coming through from this development that's bright red, we also are wondering, how much more damage this is going to cause. And I also can't find numbers that have the approximate density numbers of people that will live in the houses. So just questions more than comments.
Okay, thank you. And maybe if our staff member could address Ms. Longfellow maybe tomorrow or whatever, or to get answers to those questions for her.
Ms. Joan Wenderly.
Joan Wonderly, 765 Owens Lake Road, Milton. Good evening, Mayor, Council, and staff. And I sent you all an email, but I just wanted to read this into the record for my position. When we inherited the original zoning approval of the Wieland property from Fulton County, we were told there was nothing we could do about it. It was a done deal. Now Wieland is back requesting a modification of the plan they agreed to. I refer to this as a do-over to wear down, change, and erode our existing ordinances. My original vision of Crabapple was changed in one weekend. Who can forget the devastation that was wrought by Mr. Wieland's crews when it looked like a bomb went off and all the trees were bulldozed down for the Braeburn subdivision? Many years of tree growth gone in just a few hours. John Whelan has a fine reputation as a developer and a builder, but reducing lot sizes and setbacks is not a vision or a precedent that I want for Milton. Please uphold our existing ordinances that you will preserve, protect Milton. Please do not compromise on these issues and deny the variance. Thank you.
Thank you.
That completes public comment, but there is time to rebut.
Okay.
I'm not going to go into the substantive issues since we were requesting a withdrawal, so I'm glad to answer any questions, but we are requesting a withdrawal at this time. Thank you.
Okay. I'm going to close the public hearing now if we don't have any more public comment, and open it up to any council discussion or questions to staff. Julie?
Yes. Mr. Galloway, this might be a question best suited for you. You mentioned that you had a request for a withdrawal because you wanted to evaluate options. And so could you speak to what it is that you would hope to accomplish during a withdrawal that would be different than these variances?
Well, I mean, the issues that we have talked about was with the community. We've had several meetings with Kensington Farms. We've had meetings with interested property owners, had a number of different meetings. And some of the comments have ranged from the lot sizes to the setbacks, where those setbacks variances, which really aren't variances, it's just a change in the condition, where that might occur, et cetera. That would involve a relook at the site plan itself. Because of advertisement issues, the matter was going to have to be deferred anyway tonight. I think we need a longer period of time to evaluate things than a deferral period, so that's why we would like to have the opportunity to withdraw it tonight. So.
And I'd like to thank you very much, Mr. Galloway. I'd like to ask our city attorney the distinction between a time frame if variances are denied this evening versus a withdrawal. It's my understanding that a denial would mean that for a one-year period of time, these variances could not proceed, which would give, of course, adequate time for this applicant and the citizens to come up with, if indeed changes were needed. Can you distinguish between the time frame of a denial versus a withdrawal, or conversely an approval?
Well, I believe if the withdrawal is without prejudice, I believe the applicant could submit a new application immediately. And yes, there is the prohibition on refiling if there is in fact a denial. So it's a significant distinction, but it is one that has been presented squarely to the council, and that's for your discretion as to whether you want to authorize the withdrawal.
And I guess just for consideration, this council member is concerned that if we proceed with a withdrawal, it continues to take some of the citizens that have continued to voice concerns for multiple years through a continued process that really does not definitively address the fact that variances on this property and that smaller land lots and that further degradation of our streams is a non-issue. And so I'd perhaps like, if it be the pleasure of the mayor, I'd like to know whether or not these citizens that have been dealing with this, what their perspective is about a withdrawal versus a denial of these 5 variances this evening. Ms. Wonderly, I know that you were just up to the microphone, whether it be yourself or the gentleman, Mr. Kish from Kensington Farms. And again, the distinction being that a withdrawal can be withdrawn with no prejudice, and obviously a denial provides a definitive decision as to whether or not these variances are acceptable. I just, if it be...
Point of order, Mr. City Attorney, is this
well,
acceptable to bring somebody up for public comment again after we
Well, I guess
close
it's to answer a specific question, so it wouldn't be to open up the public comment.
Well, I think that would be a matter for the discretion of the council. I think the public hearing is closed, or well, I think there was rebuttal is what I think we were in right now. If the council has no objection to it, there's no prohibition on it, but I think he would then get to respond to those comments.
Sure. And again, Mayor, if it be your pleasure, because these are the citizens that have dealt with this, and this is the first that they've heard of a request for withdrawal, which is very different than what has been advertised, which was a public hearing. And so we have before us several things to make a decision upon, whether or not to accept a withdrawal, whether or not to proceed with this case, whether to accept the variances before us and/or to deny. So that's why I would like to ask for the input from these citizens. And actually, they didn't have a chance to rebut, and they had, I think, some time left in their 10 minutes.
I'd be glad to, if either of you would like to step up.
Jeff Kish, once again. While I certainly enjoy coming to the meetings, and I enjoy seeing your faces and so forth, I have a varied schedule, and it is difficult for me to come to these meetings. I don't have them into my schedule as it is. So in looking at this, I've made arrangements to be in town tonight. I don't know whether I'll be here every single time, just at the whim of whether we see opposition or we don't. I don't know whether that is their intent or not, but we've been fighting this for a long time, ever since they started the development. Yes, we watched the trees just go away one every 15 seconds. We know that's not going to change. What we do expect is that they be held accountable for the development that they do, and they do it in a responsible manner that follows the guidelines of our city. If we don't do that, then I really don't see the purpose. And I ask the city council, please, understand, this is of vital importance to my family. We live there, and we've lived there for 18 years. We see it every day, but we're seeing the continuing destruction of it by choice. It really is their choice. They knew the rules coming in, and they're not abiding by them. I don't want to see this go away just so that when I'm not here, they bring it up and pass it along. I think that's not fair to those of us who are surrounding the property. Thank you.
Ask a staff question.
Sure.
Ms. McDonald, what is the mitigation of the damages that's being done right now? We've heard several homeowners talk about challenges that have been imposed by the development. Is there something that's ongoing now as far as cleanup or restoration? Or I know I've seen quite a number of meetings that have become one-off meetings that have happened between John Whelan and council members and staff members and whatnot, but I'm not sure exactly what's going on as far as mitigation of the damages that have been done.
The issue that I believe that Mr. Kish has been referring to is a variance decision that was made before the Board of Zoning Appeals, and that's a separate issue from the zoning modification. And I'm really not the person to ask all the specifics of what was agreed upon between the homeowners and what the variance decision was made.
So that's not something that the city is monitoring or?
We are, but I'm not the staff person who knows everything. Maybe one of the Whelan representatives would be more informed about what is going back and forth between one of the other staff people that have to do with the engineering portion of it. And I wasn't involved in the Board of Zoning Appeals decision and all those issues that were agreed upon that would be done. So I cannot give you an informed decision.
Would that be Mr. Wilson? Chris, would that be Mr. Wilson?
Probably Mr. Sanders. Yeah, Jimmy
Right.
Sanders would be the one that would be the best situated to answer that question. Regretfully, I'm not capable of answering your question either. I know I was going to be the next one you asked.
A great question, but maybe through Mr. Sanders, or city
Unfortunately,
manager.
I'd like to have the answer tonight.
I understand, but
Challenging
maybe he can
decisions, not knowing the
at least update us on that, since it is a separate issue, but it is tied in. So
He
maybe
might be able to answer.
right, and then maybe Chris, if you also get Mr. Sanders to through you get us a response from the city side, and if we've got time, we'd be glad to let.
Yeah, as it relates to Mr. Kish and Mr. Anderson, believe me, we're not trying to pull the wool off over anybody's eyes. I mean, they've certainly been very aware of where we are. Mr. Anderson's been very involved in the multiple meetings that we've had with your staff, with members of the city council, et cetera, and he has kept Mr. Kish involved and informed. Attorneys for Mr. Whelan and Mr. Kish and Mr. Anderson have been going back and forth on getting approval to go on to Mr. Kish and Mr. Anderson's property to do the stream bank restoration, and we have to get their approval in order to get on their property. Whelan has done the things that they can do on their property. He's brought up a couple of new items tonight that we'll have to go back and look at. But in terms of the agreement to do various things that are involved with the variance, and the stream bank restoration, we have to have their agreement to do that. Then once we get that agreement, which we have been responsive to his attorneys whenever they've responded, Whelan's attorneys have responded in very quick fashion. But once we get that done, then it has to go back to EPD to get approved before any work can take place. So it is a complicated process. That is ongoing. That has to be done in order to proceed with development. What's before you tonight was a request for a site plan change primarily. No variances. There were changes of conditions. But in light of some public comment, we're asking for a withdrawal of that. As I understand it, it's not.
As far as the request tonight, my concern is for these property owners to have their damages mitigated before we proceed.
And we are ongoing. Whenever they have responded, Mr. Whelan's attorneys have responded and like kind and gotten it back very quickly to them. So as soon as they authorize the work, it will be done.
Let me
Do you have a comment, Mr. Kish?
I can't let that one go. It was only within a week of the zoning application, I believe, that they finally re-engaged us on doing this work. Now, you can say, oh, yes, we're very busy on it. But it's only when they wanted something else that they actually came back to us. They previously had been there in November, and that was the last time we even could get an email from one of the attorneys. So to say that it's been ongoing, it's a little misleading. It's ongoing when they want it to be. And, yes, we want to move forward, but we want it to move forward in a correct manner that follows the guidelines, that will be of help to the stream and subsequent erosion ongoing, and also have a responsibility moving forward. This has been one of our greatest concerns, is that even their remediation of the site contemplates a plan that will only be in place for 3 to 5 years by their own consultant's admission. Now, 3 to 5 years from now, what's going to happen when all that erosion control measures are gone and John Whelan is gone? Is it going to be left up to the Homeowners Association of Braeburn? I know that many of you belong to homeowners associations. The Homeowners Association isn't going to have the funds, the time, the money, the effort to go into something that they didn't create. So you can either contemplate that now and find a way to make the system work so that you do it right the first time, or you don't do it at all.
Thank you. Thank you. I'd like to see our staff, and I know that our staff has been working diligently. I have watched this kind of process going, but just hearing these comments tonight, I think we need to take care of this, even if it does mean waiting on the EPD, and I know they work very slowly from time to time, but you guys come together and take care of this situation before we move forward and do something, in addition, and especially creating, additional requests for the property. So I would support you taking care of the mitigation and mediation of this property before we move forward with something else.
Well, I would say this, and unfortunately, we've got 2 or 3 things moving and different issues here and whatnot, and they're all important. I would say whether we choose to deny, defer, or allow this applicant to withdraw, even if the applicant brought another plan forward, in 60, 90 days from now, we certainly would have the ability to get answers to the questions that you guys were asking for staff and, make sure they're doing what they're supposed to do legally. So, again, we can go on all night, but...
Mr. Mayor, if I can just make a point, I think to the extent that Mr. Galloway needs an opportunity to rebut, I think that would be appropriate because we've gotten into kind of a back and forth, and I think he does get the last word.
Okay. All right. Mr. Galloway, do you have anything?
I don't want to belabor this issue. First of all, I'm not sure, and Mr. Gerard would have to address this as far as whether or not you can actually take any action other than withdrawal tonight or deferral. But as it relates to Mr. Kish, we have every intention of trying to work that out. It's been ongoing. They didn't get approval from the EPD to do anything until April, and then they had to do the revised plans, et cetera. it's been going back and forth. That will proceed, and they'll continue to work on that and get that done. As it relates to the issues that we were bringing before you tonight, we thought that they would be well received. They were well received by the vast majority of people. There were some issues that were raised with regard to a couple of the items, in particular the setback, and in particular the transition of the size of lots. Those are things that have big consequences as they relate to the bottom line. As y'all might expect, banks and other parties are involved that have to be consulted, and so that takes some time. So what we would ask, again, we ask that this be allowed to be withdrawn, and if in fact we come back before you, then we will have had a lot of time to address those issues and to address the public comments that have been raised thus far.
Thank you. Okay. I don't know if our city attorney has any comments, or looks like he's getting something there. Any comments on?
Well, Mr. Mayor, the only comment I would have is that with respect to this agenda item, I think that the council has options with what it wants to do, but it does have to take options within this agenda item.
Absolutely.
Other matters.
Obviously, we've got an option of denying, deferring, or allowing the withdrawal. So at this point, if I have someone wants to bring forward a motion.
Mayor, I'll make a motion. And before I do, I have a question of our city attorney. Mr. Galloway asked for your consideration as to whether or not there was an option other than withdrawal or deferral. Could you please legally confirm that we do have an option other than a withdrawal or a deferral?
The code that I was just looking at with Robin anticipates that after the public hearing has occurred, that the decision whether to allow withdrawal rests with the council, which the necessary inference, of course, is that you wouldn't have to in the exercise of your discretion. At this point, you've had the applicant ask you to withdraw, you've had a staff recommendation of deferral, or you could proceed.
Thank you.
I've got one point of order. It was my understanding this was being administratively deferred because it was not properly posted.
That was the staff recommendation of deferral, and I think at a minimum, to the extent you want to go forward, particularly if you were contemplating granting it, you wouldn't be able to do that this evening because of the problems with the legal ad. But the more prudent course, if you're not going to allow withdrawal, would be to defer to get the legal ads correct.
But let me confirm that again then. During a deferral, we would be advertising separately. If we were to proceed with a request for denial, which is separate from the other issues at hand, but for a reduced lot size, for the reduced request for buffers, legally, can we proceed with the denial of those that are before us this evening?
The concern that we had with the ad or pertaining to the ad was an infirmity also with the legal description.
Actually, it was with the signage, the posting of the sign of the
so
parcel.
Again, you're talking about notice to other individuals. That's why I was concerned with respect to going forward and approving. But if you chose to deny this evening, I think you would be within your rights to do that.
And I appreciate that input. And the reason that I believe, and I will put forward a motion, the reason for my motion is that we just had an hour-long conversation from our city attorney about variances, and I heard Mr. Galloway say that he doesn't perceive these to be variances, but that they're a change in condition. I'm very concerned, and I'm mindful of the citizens that have been dealing with this for a long time, that we've got citizens that have asked us this evening and have asked many of us prior to tonight to ensure that the density does not increase within this Wheeland development. We've heard that separate and distinct from the EPA issues, that there is a risk of increased stormwater runoff and increased surfaces that would add to the damage to this community. And whether we were to defer this or whether or not we were to hear it again, the reality is that we have citizenry that have said that they don't want to see 10,000 square foot lots in this area, that they don't want to see a reduction of buffers from 15 to 10 feet. As a result, and knowing that by law a withdrawal does nothing more than allow this to continue to proceed, whereby given the amount of time that has gone on to date, I am prepared to put a motion forward, and I will do that now.
Councilmember, may I interrupt you very briefly
Yes.
before you begin? Let me just offer this up as well, and there's the only concern I have. And I did say that denial would be appropriate procedurally, but let me just point one thing out, and that is this. I believe that with staff's recommendation of deferral, and I know that we had gone back and forth with the Wheeling folks about the need for deferral based upon the signage, I do have a concern with respect to whether or not they came prepared to make an argument for their case in chief, if you will, because of the notice they had gotten from planning staff and even my office that there were problems with the ads. So I just want to caution the council that probably they came tonight thinking that at a minimum they'd get deferred and did not put on their, and maybe make some of the arguments they might not otherwise make tonight, because they thought at least at a minimum one thing was going to happen, and that was a deferral. I hope y'all understand what I'm saying to you. They may have had an expectation of at a minimum this was going to happen, and therefore they didn't bring the full dog and pony show they might have otherwise brought. I just want to give you that caution.
And I appreciate that commentary. My only question in response to that was that I believe that when a case is brought forward, even when staff may recommend a deferral, is that once it's been publicly advertised and once we have citizens come and once we have a public hearing, which we've now had this evening, is that all applicants, and I think especially those that are with us this evening who are quite well versed in zoning laws, would know full well that when they come before a body for decision making, that is indeed an option. So I'm mindful of that. I'm also very mindful that if we do nothing other than to withdraw this evening, I believe that we're setting up our citizenry to go back through a process which, quite candidly, is inconsistent with the land use policies for that area, and it's inconsistent with the density that was approved under Fulton County. And so with that, I will put forward a motion that would be to deny variances or the applicant's request for this zoning modification, including number 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5, which included a request for increased density, which included a request for going from 18,900 square foot lots to 10,890 square foot lots, that also included a reduction of the building separation on all lots other than those that were 1 acre, and the majority of these are indeed less than 1 acre. So this would have otherwise allowed for the 15 to be reduced to the 10-foot in all instances. And because we have had continued input from citizens, and because this would be inconsistent with our land use policies, inconsistent with the Crabapple Master Plan, inconsistent with stormwater runoff best practices, and also consistent with citizen expectations, both those that live near as well as downstream, that is indeed my motion this evening. And for the record, that is item number ZM09-02.
I'll second that motion.
Okay, got a motion and a second to deny this application. Is there any comments questions from council? Go ahead.
Yeah, I would like to make a couple comments. Number one, if we deny this, then they can build exactly what they've already had approval to build. And I have heard, and I've been involved in several of the meetings, and I have heard from a lot of the citizens that live around there that there's really something else that they would rather them do, and that Wheeling has been trying to work with them to come up with a different plan that citizens would prefer. And by denying this, we're basically not giving them that opportunity to come back for another year, and the citizens may get something that's not what they want. And with a withdrawal, they could come back with a plan that's much better, that's less dense, that everyone around there was much happier with, and we're preventing that from happening by denying their request rather than allowing them to withdraw it and work with the citizens around there to come up with a plan that they are happier with. And I have worked and talked to many of the citizens there, and I believe we are doing them a huge disfavor by denying this request.
And if you would, Mayor, I'd like to just point out that I want to be very clear that my intent with a motion to deny is not to preclude communication and continued effort, but instead to set a very definitive time frame that indeed allows Mr. Galloway, that allows John Whelan to proactively go and embrace this community and to come up with a plan, but to do it in a time frame that allows the citizens and that effectively requires the citizens and this applicant to come together to also then make clear that more density is not, in fact, what is going to be the purveyor of more time, but that by requiring these parties to come together, it will allow adequate time to resolve the EPA issues while simultaneously having proactive dialogue that puts everybody on the same playing field, as opposed to, as we heard from citizens, them not knowing when is the next meeting that they have to come to that could potentially allow for an approval that's counter to what they expect. So I just want to make very clear that my expectation is not to preclude conversation, it's to embrace the opportunity for this applicant to work with the citizens and to do it in a way that is fair to all parties and that doesn't give the advantage to those who are paid effectively to work through a plan.
Well, by denying it, you are precluding it for 1 year's time. So
No,
whether or not you like to think of it that way, by denying it, you're precluding them of working out a solution for at least a year's time.
I respectfully
So-
disagree. There's nothing that would preclude these parties from coming together and having proactive dialogue.
All right, I'm going to move on. Bill, you have a comment?
Unless I'm mistaken, I didn't hear any plea for increased density
There wasn't.
in this application. Like Karen said, if we deny this, I believe the applicant is entitled to go back to his original application, which is not the best in the West, from my perspective anyways. So I think a withdrawal provides an opportunity to tweak this plan one more time and come up with, along with community input out there, something that's more attractive than what was originally proposed. So I would find it hard to deny their application at this point and let that 63 acres lay fallow out there for another year or more. I don't think pipe farms are very attractive. They're not, of course, very productive either. They don't grow more pipes. So I find it difficult to understand the reasoning to deny it this time, and I would propose that let's send them back to the drawing boards and come up with something that's a little more attractive with the input of the neighborhoods out there. And the neighborhoods have already been meeting with the Wheelan Group, and I thought they had made some progress, and I think they'll continue to meet with them, hopefully to come up with something that's a lot more attractive. Thank you.
Okay. I'll just kind of going in order here. Unfortunately, we got a couple of different moving pieces here. I believe this application really has nothing to do technically with the first variance and whatnot. Certainly, I've been to Mr. Kish's property and Mr. Anderson's and back there, and I know, there are some problems, and you guys have worked on some of it. You've got more to do. But again, I do think there are two separate things. I would support withdrawal of this before denying it, because I think anything that the applicant brings back to us, we're still going to have the same authority or opportunity to allow the, to make sure that everything's cleaned up on the first part of with the EPA and whatnot. So again, I feel the same as others here that I would certainly support withdrawal versus deferral on it. Anybody else?
I can't support a denial of this, or if we were looking at approval of it. I would much rather withdraw or defer. Defer if we put a time limit on it versus it coming up every month. Where the citizens would know what their meeting schedule is like. I think that gives a little bit of a better definition of when this can come to some mutually beneficial agreement.
The reason why I support the denial is because a year's time frame is going to fly by. I have watched the email conversations go back and forth between the homeowners. I've had dozens of communications from homeowners that have been meeting with John Wheelan. I respect John Wheelan, as Ms. Wonderly said, greatly, and I think that it's going to be a tremendous development if the community can work together with them. So far, that hasn't happened. It's been a year already. It's been 2 years since that original variance. The two may not have anything technically to do with each other, but they have a tremendous amount to do with the overall picture. The community's not happy, and it's very hard for a community to come together and work with John Wheelan on, coming to a happy decision that everybody's going to support when there's still these lingering challenges. So my opinion would be that if we could, during this year's time frame, work towards, and everybody's open to working towards it, because we all want to see the community be beautiful, John Whelan wants to see it as much as these folks that have been homeowners for years want to see it. I think it would be ridiculous of us to think that anything's going to happen in less than a year's time frame. The damages have to be mitigated. EPD has to get involved. We've watched what happens when we're involved with them in the past. Then the work has to be done. We have to come together as a community and determine what this site needs to be. There's a lot of economic challenges, a lot of things that enter into this. To defer this time and time again, which we've seen happen in the past, just takes us nowhere. You know, this is going to force us to come together as a community. I'd like to see that happen. I'm not confident that it really has happened. I think people have had meetings, but I'm not sure that the community and John Whelan have come together. So that's why I support the denial. I think it'll force you guys to come together and really come up with something that makes us proud in that Crabapple area. And that meets, you know, not only the Crabapple Master Plan, but there is a plea for density increase here. You know, you can disguise it as anything you want to, but there is a plea here. And there's a lot of things that are entering into this plan. So I would urge us to all come together, the city staff as well, to make this a plan that we can all support and be proud to say unanimously that this is the right development for the community.
Well, for brevity, I still have some questions myself. I have questions regarding, I do think it is an increase in density. I think overall it's claimed that it's not an increase in density. But there is shifting in the property, some increase in density in one part of the property, some decrease in another. Regardless of that shift in this plan, he's asking for withdrawal, and I've seen what withdrawals can do. The timeliness of that withdrawal is interesting. I guess my question, I guess my question is why. What can't be worked out in 30 days to where we could get something back before us during a deferral period?
What can be worked out?
What can be worked out within 30 days? Yeah.
Well, we just feel like it would would require at least 60, maybe 90 days to work through the planning process, be able to work through the planning process, get back to the get that approved with banks, et cetera. And we would also need to have community input. That may take it longer and longer. This has already been deferred several times, not because of anything that we've requested, but because of advertising deficiencies. So those are the issues. We don't want to keep coming back and having to ask for deferrals over a period of time. I disagree it will take a year because as we can go forward with construction of the homes as soon as they choose to pull permits. So that's not an issue. What has to go through EPD are the mitigation measures within the stream bank. So those are two separate issues from a legal standpoint. But in terms of deferral, we don't really know how long it's going to take. And so I don't want to say it's going to be 30 days and then come back and have to have another deferral, et cetera. We've got to work through some planning issues, work through the site plan issues, and then they may choose to not bring it back at all. That is certainly a distinct possibility because of the approvals that they have today. We never sought an increase in density. It was a shift between townhomes, multifamily, and single-family to decrease the multifamily, increase the single-family, but the total density was never increased, and we never proposed that. And most of the community has looked at it and said, we would prefer more single-family than and less multifamily. But that does involve lot sizes, and so those were the tensions. And so we were trying to work through those issues. We respectfully feel like it would be best to withdraw it and then allow that to come back if and when it is appropriate to bring it back. There'll be adequate notice and opportunity to know what the schedule is going to be far in advance, just like there was in this case. So there's plenty of time to deal with that.
As a point of order, and I know our city attorney left, I need to confirm a legal point of order, Mayor. Was he coming right back?
He was. He got a call from home that he had to take. He said he'll be back in a moment.
In the interim, I have a question. In keeping with that same theme, and the deferral being recommended by staff, and you asking for withdrawal, and there being a motion on the table to deny it, I have a question regarding the deferral in general. And if you knew this, if you knew this was coming before us tonight, I guess I'm still wondering why there wasn't a better effort on the part of John Whelan Homes to engage the homeowners to work this out before tonight.
Well, I think there was a big effort to engage the homeowners. We had 2 meetings with Kensington. We had one with the board, one with the Kensington Farms residents. They publicized the meeting. There was the community zoning information meeting. There was also numerous meetings with representatives of the community, including Mr. Anderson, including Buck Bell, staff, members of the commission, council. One of those meetings occurred last Thursday. It was particularly negative in its tone in terms of responding to a proposed compromise. And as a result of that, there were seemingly lines drawn in the sand where it appeared that there would need to be some substantive changes in order to get at least that particular group's approval of the revised plan. And so that is why Mr. Whelan made the decision to ask for the withdrawal, because efforts to proceed as things were going along were not seeming to be successful. And so it would require a more substantive change, which needs more thought and more decisions on their part prior to re-engaging the community if, in fact, they choose to do that.
I think Julie had a question for our city attorney, and then I'm going to move forward.
I did. Thank you, Mayor. My question for you, Mr. Gerard, is that if I'm not mistaken, if we were to approve a denial this evening of these 5 changes, which included increased density per lot size and also included reduction of separation from 15 to 10 on virtually all of the land lots, that if we do deny this evening, that we have as a body the authority, if there was progressive movement and consideration from the community with some different plan other than what's before us this evening, that we would have the authority to allow this applicant to come back sooner than a year. And in fact, we could, according to our zoning laws, allow a decision, if it be the pleasure of this body, to bring it back sooner than a year. And in fact, I believe could bring it back as soon as 6 months from now. Is that correct?
I think that's correct.
So I just want to mitigate the concern that was noted that we couldn't somehow bring back a plan, if it was a correct plan that the citizens supported, sooner than a year. Indeed, we could. And we just heard Mr. Galloway say that we might need 60, 90, 120 more days. So knowing that a denial, it sets a very specific parameter in place that says more density per lot will not be allowed, but does nothing to preclude the applicant from having conversation that's meaningful. But the citizens from whom I've heard time and again is that they're not looking for lot sizes to increase and to go to 10,000 square foot lots, which is effectively a quarter of a lot. That's not what the citizens that I hear from, that I represent. And so knowing that a denial tonight simply says that these requests before us this evening are not appropriate, it does nothing to preclude this from coming back in a different format in 6 months. And so with that, my motion to recommend denial of these particular elements that include higher density lots and that include a reduced separation of buffer and take into consideration the concerns of citizens, not only here this evening, but those from whom we've heard time and time again. And I believe our taxpayer dollars need to be better at work than continuing to see these cases come before us inconsistently with our land use policies.
Council members, Honor Bailey, can I ask you a question real
Yes,
quick
sir.
with respect to that? Is the distinction you're making, though, is the thought that the council could waive the year but would only have to honor the 6 months of state law? Is that where you're?
That we can deny it, and of course that gives the applicant effectively a year. But if we find that there's substantive progress on a completely different plan that doesn't negate the densities that currently the master plan requires, that we could say to ourselves, if we hear from citizens and from not only the representatives of Wheeling, but from Mr. Wheeling, that they have found a mutual approach that allows this to be redone, we can say, that's awesome. We look so forward to saying, please come back sooner than a year. But again, as Councilmember DeVersa clearly pointed out, between everything that's before us, to think that there's going to be a solution any sooner than 6 months, I think is not looking at the facts before us. And what's before us, what's been before the community, were requests for increased density in terms of lots. And I know that Mr. Galloway shakes his head and says, no, the overall density is not impacted. I'm not speaking to overall density. I'm speaking to the land lots that this would set a negative legal precedent for. It would set in motion 10,000 square foot lots that currently are not allowed by the Crabapple Master Plan, a master plan that certain people, even on this council, embraced, to go from an 18,900 square foot lot down to a 10,000 square foot lot is inconsistent with what our citizens expect of us. And by denying this evening, it does not preclude conversation. It encourages it, but it says it encourages it without increasing the density. So my motion stands, and I appreciate the opportunity to make those comments.
I'm going to go ahead and move forward. I've got a motion and a second to deny this application.
All those in favor of the motion, please say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed?
Nay.
Signify by raising your hand. Motion fails. Councilmember Thurman, Councilmember Lusk, Mayor Lockwood, and Councilmember Hewitt are voting in opposition.
Okay, do I have another motion and a second?
Mayor, I'd like to make a motion that we allow the applicant to withdraw case ZM 09-02 in hopes that they will go back and work with the community to come up with a solution that is better than their original plan and much better than what is currently been advertised.
Okay, we have a motion by Councilmember Thurman and a second by Councilmember Hewitt to allow the applicant to withdraw. Any discussion? Hearing none.
All those in favor of the motion, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion passed. Councilmembers Honor Bailey, Councilmember D'Aversa, and Councilmember Tartt voting in opposition.
Okay, will the city clerk please sound the next item?
Next is RZ 0904, an ordinance to create Article 13 of the Milton zoning ordinance to establish a historic preservation commission in the city of Milton to provide for the designation of historic properties or historic districts, to provide for issuance of certificates of appropriateness, to provide for an appeals procedure, to repeal conflicting ordinances, and for other purposes. Item number 09926, first presentation on September 9th. Ms. Robin McDonald.
Good evening again. This item is before you after you've heard it. As I've summarized, or it's been summarized in the memo, it went before you on August 10th at a work session. It was recommended that it continue on through the process. It was heard, you were requesting that it be heard before the Design Review Board. There is, at the end of the memo, the action report from that Design Review Board. I won't go through every single one. I believe that you all have reviewed that, or if you have any questions about it, I'll do my best to answer them. After the Design Review Board reviewed it, it went before the City of Milton Planning Commission. At that point in time, the Planning Commission reviewed it, and they had asked for a deferral based on the items that are listed on page 5 of your memo. So basically, staff is recommending deferral as well, based on these comments from both the Design Review Board and from the Planning Commission. So if you have any questions, I will be happy to answer those.
Any questions from council for Ms. McDonald?
I guess my only question is the 30-day deferral you feel like sufficient?
Let me interject here real quick. I don't know that that necessarily would be sufficient. My intent at this point is to allow this item to come forward at the work session in October. The request of Councilmember Tartt, if you all think that's appropriate, a 60-day deferral so that we have that opportunity in October may be more appropriate.
Okay.
I'm sorry, what date would that then come before us?
November?
If you'll give me just a second, I apologize. Let's,
You're saying that it would come to us at the October work session, correct?
right, it would come to you for discussion in the October work session, and then staff, and depending on how it emerged from that work session, whatever steps it needed to take at that point. If you were to defer it tonight, I'd ask that you defer it to November the 16th.
And I just have a question for Mrs. Robin McDonald. Could you speak to what it is at the Design Review Board and the Planning Commission, some of the things that they spoke to? And the reason, Mr. Lagerman, is that when we had a work session, and some of the things that we talked about seemed to be reflected, at least in the minutes of the two meetings that I've read, in terms of where people's concerns are with the current ordinance. Could you speak to where those concerns lie?
I guess the general, between both the Design Review Board and the Planning Commission, there was concerns regarding the prior use recognition, that they didn't, at least they didn't believe it should be in the Historic Preservation Ordinance, and what would happen if that would happen. For instance, if the store on the corner of, the main store, if that was considered a prior use, now it has to go through a lot of different motions, it has to go back to you. It's not just an automatic thing, and representatives from the Historic Preservation Committee also explained that. But in the end, there was just concern about how could we control what was going to be put there. Again, you cannot move the building. The buildings have to stay there. It's not like you could kind of move it away from the road or in a better spot to provide for more parking. That's very clear. But the problem is, you know, for instance, if that was a general retail store, well, what could really be there, you know, if this was approved in the future? Again, I do want to say that it's not like it's an automatic yes about it. It would have to go back to you, and there would have to be a lot of research done, and the property owner would have to prove that the use that it had been originally. So that was a big issue for them.
So I'm sorry, I hear
that they would
perhaps
rather not have the prior use recognition in the Historic Preservation Ordinance.
Okay, so the Design Review Board recommended that language be removed, and can you tell me what the Planning Commission recommended?
Right, and also the Planning Commission had the same concerns with the prior use recognition, and they weren't very comfortable with that and what that would possibly mean for the future of those two sites that were recognized as possible sites for that use, prior use.
Thank you. And so I guess part of my question, Chris, is just as it relates to and I know the Planning Commission had some other perspectives beyond that, but in my reading of not only the ordinance and the comments that I had made historically at our work session, but also looking at the comments that came out of both the Design Review Board as well as the Planning Commission, my question, Mr. Lagerboom, to you is, do we not want to have a discussion about that item tonight, which is the prior use? Or are you suggesting that we don't have enough data to have that discussion? I'm just trying to make sure I understand what we would accomplish at the work session.
I'm suggesting that before we have the discussion, I would like for it to have been vetted and actually official comments issued from the Planning Commission, since they ultimately asked to defer it. It's my opinion that we should give them the opportunity to officially provide their comments, and then we should take it up for consideration.
So it would go back during this process before it comes to our work session. It would go back to the Planning Commission. That wasn't clear to me. I'm sorry.
Yes, they're meeting tomorrow night because of
and
the way the meetings are landing in the month. It just happens to be they will be taking up this item tomorrow at their planning.
That helps a lot. I didn't hear that in the presentation. So the Planning Commission would get to hear it tomorrow evening, and then it would come to us, Mayor, at our work session. Is that correct? Okay. In our next work session, we have one in October.
That's correct. We do.
Okay.
And I am supportive of it coming before us on a work session, because I wouldn't really call us having a discussion of it at our last work session. It was kind of presented to us, and we didn't really have time to react or digest it. But we would at the next work session. But my question is, why do we need to wait till November? I don't see any reason why we couldn't have it on the work session on the 12th and then defer it until the October 19th council meeting.
That's certainly an option. I guess I err on the side of making sure that whatever comes out of that work session, we have enough time to do. I don't mind tonight if you defer. This is just, again, in a spirit of not repetitively deferring things at council meetings. If you want to defer it to October, I'm fine with that. The worst case scenario is that we would call the item in October and have to defer it for an additional 30 days if something came out of the work session on the 12th that required more than 7 days worth of work for us to accomplish. So either or is fine with us.
Yeah, I certainly support your city manager putting on the schedule when he feels comfortable with it, with our time restrictions and whatnot. So, if we have,
We'd have to put it.
look at it in our October work session, then wherever you feel comfortable. If you want to leave a little cushion in there and do it in November, I would certainly support that, but I would leave that up to you.
Well, it's kind of a double-edged sword because, number one, I want to make sure we have time to accomplish the work that you want us to accomplish. Number two, I realize this is an ordinance that I've heard from several of you that is important to get in place because every day we wait, we run the risk of losing a historic structure. That having been said, why don't we, in the sake of being cautious with that regard, let's defer it to October the 19th, and that the worst case scenario is now I've told y'all that I don't want to make a practice of repetitively deferring things, but this might be one of those circumstances that warrants us going ahead and placing it on a calendar. We'll force all the proper notifications, and if it doesn't happen to work that night, there's no harm in deferring it that night to the November date.
Okay. Is there any comments to that, Bill?
No, I would agree with his recommendation, and propose a motion to reflect that.
Well, let me stop. Do we have any public comments on this first? Public hearing.
I have none in support, sir, but in opposition, I have Ms. Joan Borzanelli. I'm sorry. I'm having trouble with it. Yes, ma'am. Please. The L's were tying me up.
This may be a moot point if you go ahead and defer and hear from the Design Review Board and the Planning Commission, because I'm sure they'll be able to refine the wording or as it currently exists. Joan Borzanelli, 540 Kings County Court, Milton. I'd like to communicate my concerns about the Historic Preservation Ordinance draft coming before Council tonight. My specific concern is regarding the prior use recognition section. I feel it would give unrestricted access of certain properties to commercial development, and these views are apparently shared by the Design Review Board and the Planning Commission. My hope is that the vote be deferred until the language is worked out, especially the prior use recognition section. My first preference would be to have it removed, and the second preference would be to have the ordinance state specifically what the sites could be used for. Have the use comply with the current zoning and do not provide a loophole for expanding any type of commercial development. As it stands now, the wording is wide open to interpretation. A property that would be affected by this section is located 4/10 of a mile from my home. The last time the country store on the corner of Hopewell and Thompson came up as a zoning issue, there was much public comment about against expanding commercial to this currently AG1 zoned lot. A majority of homeowners in our subdivision signed a petition to deny the rezoning. Thank you.
Thank you.
That completes public comment.
Okay, I'll go ahead and close the public hearing now if there's any council discussion or questions. Okay, do I have a motion and a second?
I'll put forward a motion. I would put forward a motion to defer, as recommended by our staff and as recommended by our Planning Commission, to defer our historic preservation draft ordinance, and during that deferral that it would return to the Planning Commission on Tuesday, September 22nd, returning then to a work session of the council. I believe I heard our city manager say October 12th, to then be back on our council agenda for October 19th.
I'll second it.
A motion by Councilmember Bailey, second by Councilmember Thurman for deferral. Any comments or questions? Discussion?
A question for our city attorney. Did we cover all the dates as we needed to?
You did.
Thank
Yes,
you.
ma'am.
All right, hearing none.
All those in favor of the motion, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? That's unanimous.
Okay, will the city clerk please sound the next item?
Next, we have item number 3, which is U09-01/VC09-01 at 13120 Arnold Mill Road by Frank Schaefer, the Landscape Group Incorporated, to obtain a use permit for a landscaping business on 1.74 acres at a density of 3,908.04 square feet per acre, Article 19.4.27. Applicant is also requesting a 3-part concurrent variance to 1, delete the 50-foot buffer and 10-foot improvement setback along the west property line from the right-of-way for a distance of 140 feet, 12H.3.1, Section C1, and 2, to delete the 50-foot buffer and 10-foot improvement setback along the east property line from the right-of-way for a distance of 140 feet, 12H.3.1, Section C1, and 3, to allow a sign located less than 10 feet from the right-of-way, Article 33, Section 21C. Agenda item number 09813, first presentation on March the 2nd, 2009, and was deferred on July 20th, 2009. Ms. Robin McDonald.
Good evening again. This item, the landscape group, we had asked for a deferral in the July meeting on July 20th to be deferred until tonight to allow the applicant adequate time to provide a new survey. The Community Development Department provided them the information and a list of surveyors again. This was actually done previously as well. But the survey that was submitted to us and reviewed by staff, both in Community Development and Public Works, was that the survey and accompanying site plan was inaccurate to the point that there was no way to really know exactly what was needed on the site. And so Mr. Tom Wilson and Mr. Jimmy Sanders met with the applicant, with his attorney, as well as his surveyor. I think it was about 2 weeks ago. And they went again on the site and talked about the issues and showed them the differences between the two surveys and the issues that staff had with them, and not knowing where the stream truly was, and then therefore where stream buffers could encroach into different various parts of the site. So Mr. Wilson instructed their surveyor and their attorney of exactly what we needed again, and so that was the applicant had promised to get another site plan to us. I believe it's on its way. It is not here. Obviously did not come in time for us to make any decision. So therefore staff is recommending another deferral. I know it sounds redundant, but we do really want to give another opportunity for the applicant to make things right on the survey, and therefore staff recommends deferral until the October 19th meeting.
Is there any questions for Ms. McDonald?
Just one.
Bill?
Do you know if the applicant has engaged a registered land surveyor to do that work then?
The surveyor that's actually doing the work is not a licensed surveyor, but he is doing work under a licensed surveyor that basically the licensed surveyor can sign his work.
I've seen the plan that he submitted there, and obviously this applicant is not sophisticated enough to understand, or hadn't been sophisticated enough previously to understand what was required. So I understand the process that you're going through now, and the guidance that you've given him to get it right this time.
Any other questions for Ms. McDonald before we hear public?
Question. Can you confirm for me how many times this has been deferred?
Sure. The first deferral, well, first of all, the Planning Commission had recommended deferral to allow more time for them to review it. I believe it went before them the first time in February of this year, and then they deferred it to March, and then in March they made a recommendation that was forwarded on to you for the April 29th meeting, and then it was deferred until the May 18th meeting, and at the May 18th meeting, it was deferred until the June 15th, and then it was deferred on July 20th, and then ultimately for a 2-month deferral to this meeting tonight on September 21st.
So basically, give or take 4 months, we're working on a year of deferrals with a business that's been operating illegally. The second question, the information that has been given to us to date, do you have any reason to suggest that one or more of these 3 variances will not be needed? Or do we even have enough information to even...
To be honest, the survey was so inaccurate to the original survey that I wouldn't even want to answer that question because we don't have accurate information.
Is there a situation with the,
Okay, you're fine.
is there a situation with the septic?
Since then, regarding the septic, there has been, one of the items that was needed was a testing of the water. Fulton County Health Department has tested the water since the last meeting, and it has come back to be appropriate. There's no problems with the actual water. As far as with the septic, there's really nothing more that we've progressed on as far as the septic and the size and everything.
A request that the well be moved?
Right. Well, the well, they did talk to a plumber who said that there still would, even if you moved the tank of the well into the garage or into the warehouse, there still would be a pump there. So it didn't accomplish what they thought it could accomplish. Yeah.
Extending these variances,
Correct.
which, given our, our recent discussion, I don't know if you were here for the discussion, but how would you say that these variances fall into the discussion that we had earlier today, Mr. Gerard? Would those classify a hardship that was something that the applicant had control over, or one where we're trying to force fit something into this property?
Well, now the scenario I received earlier makes all the sense to me. I mean, I can't, and I won't change, my opinion if there has been a question with respect to the legality or appropriateness of the facility and the business thus far. I certainly don't believe that granting a variance in this situation would be required. I think you have all kinds of discretion in this matter.
Bert, you have a comment?
Yeah, just to make sure I understood the question that Al asked a few minutes ago, Ms. McDonald, is that perhaps, or perhaps not, one way or the other, based on the lack of an accurate survey, some of these may or may not be necessary, or more may be necessary after you get an accurate survey. Is that correct?
Yeah, I mean, I guess I will change it a little bit. They will need variances to some of the buffers that have already been requested. I guess more concisely, there could be additional variances needed once we confirm an accurate survey.
Anybody else have a
Mr. Mayor, may I ask? Oh,
Yeah,
go ahead.
go ahead.
I have a question. I'm not sure who the right person, maybe Ms. McDonald or maybe Mr. Gerard. Assuming, and this is a hypothetical, assuming that a special use permit was granted for the property and all of the variances were denied, what would that business be able to do? Yeah. They have to cut back the intensity of use on the property to be able to operate within the our laws?
Correct. I mean, if you denied all the current variances that are before you, I would think it would be very difficult to operate a landscape business because the trucks would not be able to get in and out of the property and to be parked in the right location and to have turnarounds. I think it would be very difficult to operate unless you just used it as an office, purely as an office for land and not have trucks and not have other things. But
would reinforce the theme that not every property is designed for every purpose.
Which, to the extent that there's been a significant expenditure of funds on this property, which would therefore be thwarted, that gets us back to the issue, though, of whether that significant expenditure of funds was done with a lawful use.
I have a question. Obviously this keeps getting deferred, and it sounds like it does get deferred for legitimate reasons and getting the survey all right, and we do want to make sure we get it right. But at what point in time, and we've allowed them to continue operating the business for the 8-9 months where it's being deferred, at what point in time do we just say, enough is enough, we have to make a decision?
Let me jump in with that, Councilmember Thurman, because I was waiting to be able to make this comment tonight, because I've thought about this case a lot as it's come forward and continues to come forward, and every time I get ready to put it on an agenda. What I have gone back to in the back of my head is I truly believe that it is our staff's responsibility to operate in a citizen-friendly and customer service type environment. And as long as the applicant is continuing to make steps forward and continuing to work with us, which I believe they are in this case, it will consistently be our staff recommendation for deferral. Although I've got to tell you that I, like you, at some point say enough is enough, but I don't know that it's the staff's decision as to when that enough occurs. I think you have a staff in place that will continue to work with our citizens here in Milton until the elected body makes a decision as to when is enough enough.
So that really should be a decision that comes from the 7 of us, not from staff. Staff will continue working.
Absolutely. We'll continue to work with any of our citizens who want to continue to work with us. And we haven't had that door shut to the extent that I would come before you tonight and say, Mayor and Council, we have just tried and tried and tried, and we cannot get this person to respond to us. That has not happened in this particular case. So I don't want to paint the picture that they've stopped working with us, but we will stop working with them when you all tell us that enough is enough.
Well, I would think if we made a decision to defer it this last time, in my opinion, that needs to be the last deferral, and we need to make a decision on it, because by that time it will have been a 9 or 10 month time period in which they've been continuing to operate the business. And at some point in time, you have to gather whatever facts you can and make a decision.
Okay. Is there any public comment on this?
No public comment?
Okay, I'm going to close the hearing.
Yes, sir. Thank you, Mayor. I just wanted to confirm, when you were going through the dates, Robin, I counted up 7 deferrals. So we've had 7 deferrals. I can't say that I'm accustomed to being party to a 7 deferral process. I would like to confirm also that I think I heard Mrs. McDonald say, and again, I'm all for deferrals when it means that we're going to produce something at the end that's significantly different than what's before us. But I believe I heard Mrs. McDonald say that these variances, these 3 variances to the buffers, would still be required, and that during a deferral period, what we would see would be additional variance requests. Taking that into consideration in conjunction with what we heard from our city attorney between 5 and 5:45 this afternoon, is that we do indeed have a business that was cited for illegal activity. These variances are not a hardship. It's self-imposed, and it therefore doesn't meet the standard of our law. So my question for all of us would be, and to our city attorney and staff, is that even if we were to give them yet one more 30-day deferral, what would be different at the end of that period? And again, I think at some point the decision becomes, when is enough enough? And I also heard in response to the question about, is there a surveyor that's producing the results that we need? And thus far, that has not come forward. And I don't believe that surveying company is a different surveying entity. I'm concerned that we're continuing just to delay the inevitable. And I think sometimes we just have to come to a decision when we have the data that we need. I'm not convinced that another deferral would produce anything different that would allow us to make a different decision than what we would make here this evening.
Mr. Mayor, can I ask a question of Ms. McDonald? Robin, I'm assuming there's been no professional engineering or any sort of as-built done on this property. That's the problem, right?
Correct.
I mean, at a minimum, Mr. Mayor, to the extent that this is obviously causing the council concern, many times in court, the court may allow something, a case to be postponed with direction. And, it would seem to me if what we're missing here, and with Councilmember Zonner Bailey's concerns about the merits, the substantive notwithstanding, which I fully get, at a minimum, the thing that you would expect from someone operating in good faith is, okay, we'll give you deferral, but the deferral is with a direction, and the direction is you must go out and have a professional surveyor do an as-built or do some sort of a registered, professional plat, because to keep getting apparently what we're getting is simply not. I mean, here's my concern. I'm not even sure how the council could act on the variance, because the key to a variance is you need to know exactly what's needed to know if it's the minimum required. We don't know, is what I think I heard as well.
Tim, they have gotten direction. I mean, that's where our concern lies. I mean, 7-time deferrals, I mean, even with regard to some of the referrals that were caused by some of our boards, I mean, the direction from our staff we have to rely on has been solid, and yet they have not complied with that direction. I mean, they've stood before the council, and they, we've made comments to them and recommendations to them, and, they know that they've been operating an illegal business. So, at this point, I think that we're, wasting other taxpayer dollars in continuing to allow our staff, even though I support greatly customer service, and Mr. Lywood, I think that's absolutely the approach that we should take, and I'm glad to hear every time you say that you support that, because I certainly do. But in this instance, this is not about customer service. This is about the fact that we've got challenges, with a group that has been operating an illegal business and now trying to force fit something into a property that it doesn't meet our laws. So, are we at a point where we?
I do think I heard from our city manager, and I know discussions with him, that the applicant is working with him, and it sounds like you've given him direction at this point to come back with a professionally done plan. I guess he's in the process of that.
Right. I got a message from their office manager that the surveyor was sending it through the mail. Again, you don't have to have a CAD drawing to be accurate. You have to be accurate. It has to be correct. So that's what we're waiting for. So that's going to be coming to us any day now.
Is the applicant here?
Yes, he is. He just
Mr. Mayor, if it pleases you and the council and you would like to give him permission, he has notified me, Mr. Frank Schaefer, that he does wish to speak. That would be your decision.
I'm fine with that. I'll allow that.
Mr. Frank Schaefer?
Mayor, Council, good to see you tonight. My name is Frank Schaefer. I'm at 13120 Arnold Mill Road, Milton, Georgia, 30075. As far as the deferrals, most of them really, I don't believe were of our fault. I mean, there were things that came up that y'all asked us to provide, and that's all we're doing. We're trying to provide you the right information. As far as the site plan, we hired somebody that we thought was competent, and our understanding is that they knew what they were supposed to be doing. Looking back on hindsight, we would probably have gone with a different surveyor. I mean, that's as honest as I can answer it. I think meeting with Mr. Wilson and with Dave, the surveyor, meeting them together, I think we've gotten a lot of the, well, hopefully I think the site plan should be accurate now. We want to get through this just as well as you guys do, too. I mean, we're not trying to hold this up. And I think we've been meeting with everything that y'all have asked us to do. We're trying to be compliant, and that's really where we're trying to be. And we're just asking for a deferral. We're ready. We were ready. We were trying to be ready on the last date. Unfortunately, the site plan didn't meet the criteria, which was, unfortunately, I didn't realize that when it was ready. So I believe we'll have it ready for the next meeting. We're just asking for a deferral, and hopefully we'll have a vote. And will hopefully be a compliant citizen of Milton. That's all.
Thank you. Okay. Is there any other questions? And then I'll ask for a motion in a second.
Mayor, I don't have a question. Because the applicant was given the opportunity to speak, if you could just answer one question, and that was you indicated that you were ready. Can you speak to whether or not you are still seeking variances on the 1.74 acreage?
Yes, the variances are the same. They will not change.
Okay.
We will not need any more.
But you will continue to need the 3 variances that are before us?
Well, the sign variances, speaking with Robin, I think we're just going to let the sign variance go. We're just going to ask for the 2, and we've changed the 1 from a 50-foot buffer to a 30-foot. So we have changed that.
So you still need buffer variances in order to
On the 2 sides.
Okay.
That's
Thank you.
correct.
Thank you. Do I have a motion in a second?
I have a question. Mr. Gerard, you said that, and I want to make sure I hear you clearly, because I'm prepared to make a motion on this, but then you also brought up the issue about needing more information to even rule on the variances.
Right.
Could you speak to that a little bit more? Because, I mean, I guess I'm seeing it that we've allowed that opportunity to provide that documentation.
And again, I have not reviewed the file. I'm listening to what Robin is telling the council and hearing what the council's concerns are. A variance is supposed to be specific to the property. A variance is supposed to be exact. What you need as far as the applicant, it needs to be the bare minimum that is needed to make whatever the project is work. And what I think I was hearing was, at this point, staff didn't even have a site plan or a plat that was exact enough to know exactly the minimal amount of variance that was required. And of course, until that information is known, you can't act upon it, because you have to grant the variance that is peculiar to a specific piece of property, granting only the amount of variance that is the minimal amount needed. And until Ms. McDonald has that, you can't act on it. That's the point.
You're saying grant variances, but we can deny variances.
Of course, you could deny it as well. My only concern would be that, again, you're acting, and let's go back to that quasi-judicial capacity, until you know the information that is being asked of you, it is difficult for you to rule. And your record would arguably be incomplete.
So 30 days from now, when we do a deferral for another 30 days, and if they were not to have the information we need then, when do we stop? And under what basis would we ever vote to deny this if we never get the information we need to do that? That doesn't make much sense to me.
Well, no, of course it doesn't, and I think the council would be within its rights to, for instance, not to lead the council, but if you were in the mood to say that you would grant another variance with the understanding that if the record is not complete upon the next time it comes to your agenda, you will seek a denial if the record is not.
And I assume you went a deferral.
Yes,
Is what you meant to say.
exactly. That is not the least bit out of line. I mean, the reality is it takes city resources and time and expense to deal with this. In addition, what I'm hearing is you have a illegal use on the property that is being allowed to perpetuate with each month that it's not acted upon. So I have no concerns with the council taking, particularly, no court is ever going to say you didn't give anybody the requisite amount of time to get this application completed. I heard the gentleman say, and Mr. Schaefer indicate, that he was only providing what has been asked of staff. And again, I'm hearing that. I don't know what has been asked, but I will only say my experience with staff is that they typically ask for things that are required under your zoning code to be provided. I don't suspect they're asking for something that's outside the realm of what our code required in the first place. So to the extent you wanted to condition the deferral on that basis, that the record must be complete the next time it gets to you, that is a very fair condition.
Maybe further to Alan's point here, if we were to make this deferral, this motion conditional on compliance with all of the requirements of providing a proper site plan, could we at the same time condition it that if it's not if it's not presented properly, could we further condition it that we would suspend his operation at that time? Or is that too harsh?
You know, it's actually not. I mean, the reality is if you have an illegal use in the ground, you have the ability to go ahead and enforce compliance now. So no, that would not be inappropriate at all. I mean, you would have the ability to direct the city manager to request, code enforcement or personnel to go out there and begin, taking the actions they can take. I mean, that's the whole problem with having an illegal use.
Ms. McDonald, you made a statement, or there was a question asked, and you made a statement with regard to how the business could operate legally at this time without these variances. Is there any way that Mr. Schaefer could leave here and get his business in order to the point where he can operate on that site now without these variances and operate legally? Or would he be shut down at this point if we were to deny this or to ask that he cease operations, that it's illegal operations?
Or do we need a correct site plan to make that decision?
You'd have to ask him what he thought he could.
Well, tell me from your perspective as our staff expert what the illegal operation is at this time. Decided for illegal operation, which is why he's coming before us for the variances.
Well, it's for a landscaping business that includes storage of materials, trucks,
And there's not enough room.
landscape vehicles.
Okay, so and there's not enough room. So at this point, if we were to deny this, just help me understand completely that he wouldn't be able to store those trucks, which we've had many of those types of cases before us. So he wouldn't be able to store those trucks, but he could still operate his business.
It appears that he could operate an office, but you would have to check with him.
Right, you'd have to
Right,
seek
you
a...
still need to have the use permit, but it would be without the variances that he's requesting at this point in time. It appears that he could operate an office for the landscape business, but without any of the other types of items that would be needed, like landscape trucks and storage areas, et cetera.
But he couldn't operate an office even without the use permit, could he?
Correct, unless
So he-
somebody lived there.
So
and
there's
it
nothing
was-
he can do legally on that property without us giving him a use permit and/or variances.
Right.
Other
I have
than
many situations where we have home occupations who people use their home as an office, purely as an office, where they do their accounting or scheduling or whatever.
Correct.
And that could occur in a single-family residence. Now, at this point in time, that 800-square-foot structure that sits toward the front of the road is purely only an office use. There's nobody residing there.
But to your point, as currently zoned, it can be used as a residence, it can be used as an office without a special use permit, but it would be required to meet the standards. And in order, and if I may, I believe the question that was just asked is, can this current activity continue without the approval of variances? And I think I've heard Mrs. McDonald, you say that no, it couldn't. We also heard the applicant say that even with the survey that's in the mail, they still need variances. And again, we heard at 5 o'clock from our attorney that those variances, there's not a hardship. And so my question remains, what would be different between now and in 30 days?
That was the reason, the basis for my question. My concern is that we not approve these variances. And, because going on what we just had a discussion on earlier this evening, not approving these variances, is going to equivalently give him, where he should be right now in this business on this side.
And I don't disagree with either of the two of you, and I certainly won't be, I'll go ahead and say, I'm certainly not going to be approving any of variances. This council member won't be approving any of variances without, a hardship that's exhibited. However, I'm also hearing our attorney say that we need to clearly state what it is that we need in order to rule on those variances. And am I hearing you correctly?
You are, Councilman.
Okay, and I understand that staff has worked with the applicant. I understand that. But I do think, out of an abundance of caution on our parts, I do think that it would be necessary, at least from my perspective, to provide them clear direction on the record from this council on exactly what it is we need to rule against or for these variances. given that we have, this has been going on since February '09, and, we're talking about a whole nother month, I'm wondering why we can't consider this at the next regular meeting. I mean, does it have to be postponed to the next zoning agenda meeting, or can we postpone it to the next meeting?
I don't think it would make the advertising because we're so tight with the newspaper ads. It's like a week and a half ahead, so. And it has to have 15 days and 20 days posting of the sign. 15 days advertising in the Milton Herald, and then the first time it could be published would be a week from Wednesday. And that doesn't give you the allotted time for the first session in October, I don't believe.
First session in October is October 5th.
Correct, and it has to be 15 days prior. So we're already there almost this Wednesday.
As a point of order, can I ask our city attorney one quick question? The dialogue right now about whether or not we know what's before us effectively, it's always been my experience in the past that what has been advertised and what is publicly before us is a request based on these variances, and there's some question as to whether or not that survey is accurate or not, but what has been publicly advertised and what is publicly before us is a legitimate request for these variances based on that property. Right. And so lawfully, does it preclude us from making a definitive decision this evening? I'm perplexed by that because I don't think that it does.
It's a good question, Councilmember. My concern is a very pragmatic one. If the council is intending to deny, and I don't know what you're intending, I don't want to forecast that, but if you were, my preference would be to have the full record, a complete record in front of you. I don't believe the last deferral, the applicant was put on notice that if your application is not complete at this meeting, we will deny it and take action. You can correct that this time for the next one, and you may want to do that. But I would like to have the record be complete from the standpoint of the integrity of any potential appeal.
Mayor?
Can we make the motion for deferral, can we make that contingent upon an automatic denial if it's not provided by that time? I heard you say that.
I would not do that, Councilmember. I'll tell you why. I wouldn't want you to make a motion where you in advance forecast the exercise of your discretion.
Phil, if you want to say something.
Just quickly, Robin, I'm not familiar with your application routing sheet, but are you assured that all of your requirements or the city's requirements are plainly, clearly, and definitely articulated on any correspondence that we've sent? Thank you.
This was transmitted to them the beginning of the summertime.
Okay,
and it was actually in the application on the original zoning application. So, yes.
Okay, and the applicant, that has been clearly explained to the applicant, and there's no doubt in his mind, whoops, sorry about that, as to what's required in it.
Right. I wasn't at that meeting, but Mr. Wilson took this with him to show to them, so I'm assuming he reviewed it with the surveyor and the attorney.
So I guess what I'm hearing from our city attorney, if someone wanted to make a motion to defer this, but clarify that in the motion that, the 30-day deferral or whatever the time is that the proper information is in and, staff's got time to.
I want to clarify, Mr. Mayor, my comment to Councilmember Tart as well, and that is this. What I don't want the council to do is make a motion that if the application is not complete, it will stand automatically denied. I think it would be a motion to defer with the instruction that if it is not complete with the next time it comes back, the council will likely deny it.
Or will not defer again. We'll make an action at that point. Okay. Karen?
Mayor, I'd like to make a motion.
Okay.
I'd like to make a motion that we defer case U 09-01, VC 09-01, 13120 Arnold Mill Road by Frank Schaefer, the Landscape Group, Inc., and the three concurrent variances for a period of 30 days to be heard on our October 19th meeting, with the instruction that the application needs to be complete at that time, including the survey performed by a or signed off on by a registered surveyor, so that we may be able to make a final decision at that time. Does anything else need to be added to that, Mr. Attorney?
No, council member, that's an appropriate motion.
Okay.
Second
Got a
motion.
Motion by Councilmember Thurman, a second by Councilmember Lusk. Is there any discussion?
I'd actually like to amend the motion to add to what Councilmember Thurman's original motion was, that to suspend the operation at that time if the information is not presented to us by that date.
Can we add that to the motion, or can we just?
Let me offer up.
What's your comment?
My comment, if Councilmember Tar, could it be to amend to add that we with the council, the city will immediately commence enforcement if it's not complete, as opposed to suspend operation?
Yes. Let me change my amendment. The amendment would be to commence enforcement of the illegal activity on that date if the information is not provided to us.
I will accept that friendly amendment.
Second that.
Is there any other comments?
I had one question, Mayor. Thank you. Quick question was just when you said that we needed to, for the record, make it clear that the next time we would take action, I just want to be certain that we're not setting in motion an expectation that when applicants come to us, that there's any question that we expect those packages to be complete the first time. And I would just want to make sure that what we're not doing is setting in motion that if we get into a scenario where folks are coming to us and they, but my data was incomplete, therefore I need a deferral, that this we're setting aside as an unusual circumstance, but that our records, as Councilmember Lusk pointed out, are quite clear in terms of what's expected for the zoning process, and that by law we're not required to let an applicant know that they might get a denial.
That's correct, Councilmember, and the only reason I think that perhaps providing that advance notice now would make sense is because of the history of deferrals.
Yes, sir.
As opposed to this being a one. I would be much more comfortable if this was a one-time isolated event, not worried about that notice. But given the history, I think it makes sense to put them on some sort of oral notice, which I think the council is more than done.
I appreciate that confirmation.
Okay. Hearing no more comments, I have a motion and a second.
We're voting on the amended motion and the motion that was amended and accepted. All those in favor of the motion?
Point of order.
Yes.
I'm sorry to have to do this because I made an amendment to the motion, and that was a rightfully made amendment to the motion, which could have been seconded.
It was.
But she actually made a friendly amendment to her original motion. I wouldn't call that an amendment to the motion. That was a clarification to her original motion.
Your position being that now it's not an amended motion at all.
No,
it's an original motion.
Original motion that
Okay.
she clarified that was further seconded by the original person.
I'm comfortable with that clarification.
Voting on the motion. All those in favor of the motion, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? That's unanimous. Mr. Mayor, Mr. Charles Murphy Hubbard is here. He could not make it in time for general public comment. I ask if you and the council members agree that he be allowed to speak.
I'm okay with that.
Mr. Charles Murphy Hubbard, please come forward, state your name and address for the record.
Hello, Mayor and council members. My name is Charles Murphy Hubbard. I'm at 535 Twin Rose Way, Milton, Georgia. And I'm here to ask that ordinance be considered in regards to the disposal of pet waste by pet owners. And not only because it's a nuisance, but also because it's a health hazard and it can affect our drinking water, et cetera. And the city of Albuquerque has a model out there, a pretty good law that outlines the proper disposal of pet waste and the reason why. And I don't have a copy of it with me today, but if it's something that could be considered, I wouldn't mind bringing something up here to present to the council members and to the mayor.
Okay. Thank you.
It's a great suggestion. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay. We'll move on to unfinished business. Will the city clerk please sound the next item?
Approval of an ordinance of the mayor and council of the city of Milton, Georgia to adopt amendments to the fiscal 2009 budget for each fund of the city of Milton, Georgia, amending the amounts shown in each budget as expenditures, amending the several items of revenue anticipations, prohibiting expenditures to exceed appropriations, and prohibiting expenditures to exceed actual funding available. Item number 09927, first presentation on September the 9th, 2009. Ms. Stacy Inglis.
Good evening again, Mayor and Council. The amendments that are brought before you tonight, you've already heard the first and second public hearing on them. And it's just simply, as we near the end of the fiscal year, there are additional amendments that need to be made to the budget to bring everything in line with actuals that have occurred so far. In the general fund, we're requesting an increase of $32,320. This will bring the total of the general fund budget from $21,380,576 to $21,406,886. In the special events fund, we are requesting an increase of $6,400 to account for donations received for the Milton Roundup. This will increase the fund from $40,000 to $46,400. In the compensated assets fund, we're requesting an increase of $43,763 to account for a portion of the money obtained through a drug seizure. This brings the total of the compensated assets fund up from $0 to $43,763. In the capital projects fund, we're requesting a decrease of $108,582. This is simply bringing the line items in line with actuals. Again, this is a project-linked budget, and whenever the projects carry over from one year to the next, there were some expenditures that hit the prior year that decreased the budget balance that was supposed to carry over, and so this is correcting that problem. The capital projects fund total will go from $6,372,113 to $6,263,531. In the capital grant fund, we're requesting an increase of $70,000 to transfer money out of the capital projects fund into the capital grant fund for the crabapple study to combine it with the transportation master plan. This brings the total of the capital grant fund from $1,853,240 to $1,923,240. That's all. We request that you approve the amendments that are brought before you.
Any questions? Okay, do I have a motion and a second?
I'd like to make a motion to approve agenda item number 09927, approval of an ordinance of the mayor and council of the city of Milton, Georgia to adopt amendments to the fiscal 2009 budget for each fund of the city of Milton, Georgia.
I'll second that.
We have a motion by Councilmember Hewitt, second by Councilmember Dioverso. Any discussion? Hearing none.
All those in favor of the motion, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? That's unanimous.
City Clerk, please sound the next item.
Mayor, I hate to interrupt. Could we take a 5-minute break real quick? I've got a staff member I need to follow up with on something. Thank you.
All right. We need to take any kind of action on that? 5-minute break.
Right back. Are you tired? I bet you are. You got to be.
Not used to tolerance. Thank you.
Yeah, you got to be.
I know.
Oh, you didn't.
No, you're just hanging. You have a good day. So how you doing? Good to see you. What's the odds? Good. Are you doing? Actually, pretty well. Just, I just picked up offices in Texas and Oklahoma, so it's spreading out, which will be good. Let's get this. Let's see your language. What's that? Listen here. It's been a while. I mean, this good to see you. Yes, she's a junior. No, really.
We'll go ahead and talk to you for a minute. Well, thank you.
Okay. I told him you could sit in your chair.
Yep.
That's what it's about.
Word substitution suggestions.
No, that's what it's about.
Take it easy. Because you'll get there later and you're going to say, oh, what should I have done? And Ricky's in D3, still over at school where you're working. And that means we've had some good teachers over at home. But they're all they're doing well. I got caught, I was in Houston, I had to fly out there, I was interviewing for a position there, interviewing people for a position. I hired, that was when we had our rainstorm last Wednesday. So my flight that was supposed to leave at 4:30, ended up, we finally taxied out at 7 and set up the runway. I didn't get home till like 12:30 at night. It's like, okay. And I got one of those exit row seats because that has more space. That's fine if you only have a 3-hour flight. But you're sitting on the plane for almost 3.5 hours, 4 hours. You can't lean back and you're rigid. That was good. So how's everybody doing in your family?
They're doing good. They're on the Milton baseball team.
Really?
I got Jacob, who's the selection, I guess, the last. And it's going on a little yeah, Jared's in his dream.
Right.
Got some comments from the audience that,
Tina's slow, Stacy's slow.
yeah, you can't hear mine and all but Karen. I know. All right, are we ready?
Mayor, you ready?
I'm ready.
Check, 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 check. I understand.
Have you seen that? Is that not crazy? I told my wife.
So I can get I'll get the first presentation and you can go on see what it comes up.
Okay, he said we don't need a motion to reconvene. Could everyone please have a seat? We're ready to reconvene.
Check, check.
Our next item is approval of an ordinance of the mayor and council of the city of Milton, Georgia to adopt the fiscal 2010 budget for each fund of the city of Milton, Georgia, appropriating the amounts shown in each budget as expenditures, adopting the several items of revenue anticipations, prohibiting expenditures to exceed appropriations, and prohibiting expenditures to exceed actual funding available. This is agenda item number 09928, first presentation on September the 9th, 2009. Mr. City Manager.
All right, Mayor and Council, let's jump into this budget. I think we've been waiting to do this. I want to make sure we use our time wisely tonight. I know your time's valuable. And let's accomplish that by working together to get some questions answered for you. Hopefully right off the bat we took note of what you asked during the work session last week. We've provided some answers to those questions. Please give us an opportunity after I make just a short presentation for the public's benefit that may or may not have joined us for either the first presentation or the work session. And then we'll answer those questions for you, hopefully fairly methodically, so that we don't leave anything out. And then certainly we'll be happy to answer any other questions that might come up. The general overview of the 2010 fiscal budget for the city of Milton. I can tell you this is a budget that has been through a lot of staff discussion, a lot of staff presentation, a lot of questions and more questions and then questions again at the staff level. So it has been very, very questioned before it got to a document that you're being presented. I can tell you that this budget, like our previous budgets, is broken down into a maintenance and operating section. We explore operating initiatives as well as capital projects and the requests that go along with those. As was stated, this budget has met the requirements of advertising as well as being before you in a first presentation at a work session and tonight for your consideration for adoption. In putting together the fiscal 2010 budget, we based it on three key financial factors. First and foremost, the sustainability of existing resources, and that's important. At least that is, as we go through this budget, we need to maintain what we have as a first priority, and then try to enhance on that where we can. Enhance on those services through operating initiatives, as well as maintaining a quality of life through capital projects. So those three sections are what you will see in this particular budget. As in previous years, I don't think it goes without saying that our revenue comes from similar sources and in similar percentages. Property tax revenue leading the way, 51.8%, or $9,228,549. Expenditures, again, move in a fashion that's very similar to previous years and shouldn't be a shock to you. Fire first, police second, public works third. Salary and benefit detail for the city of Milton this year at total combined salary and benefits $6,732,453. Of that, $1.784 million is benefits, making a benefit cost to salary ratio at 27%, which is in line with good accepted standard. This budget, as it's presented to you tonight, and as I've said before, does include a cost of living adjustment, a very modest cost of living adjustment for the employees of the city. I am keenly aware that they are the ones that represent all of us every day and how we interact with our community. And as I've said before, and I'll say again, I am of the belief that it is more expensive to go out and find new talent than it is to retain the good talent that you have. I think we have a happy workforce. I would like to do more for them, and we have been able to do more for them in previous years. That's just not something I can comfortably come in front of you tonight based on the economy where it is at this point and request your consideration of anything in addition to a cost of living adjustment. We do have a CH2M Hill contract cost in this budget. That contract cost is at $5.515,483 million. What I anticipate, and this is further defined in the letter that precedes the budget, is that these are expenses that will be used to provide, or this is a dollar figure that will be used to provide the general government services that we are used to CH2M Hill providing. As you all are aware, you approved and has been issued a notice to CH2M Hill to transfer away from their services during this fiscal year. Wish I could have a budget for you that said this is exactly where every dollar and every penny was going to go during this transition. Regretfully, I don't have that, and that's just not possible. We spend the better bulk of our day working on how that transition works. I can assure you that I am looking out every day at Milton's tax dollars and making sure that we don't spend a dime more than we need to, but so that we do spend every dime that we need to make sure that services continue at the level of which you expect. Where we hope, and where this is probably a whole other discussion, but where I'm confident tonight to bring to you that budgeted cost for the contract, whether or not those services are provided by CH2M Hill or by a staff internally or some combination thereof, that those dollars represent a very conservative approach to being able to provide those services over the year. I do believe, and I hope that I will be able to come back to you in the near future and show that there are some cost savings there, even above that $5.515 million. I toyed with the idea of providing some of those actual numbers tonight, and I'm just not certain enough of them that I wanted to say publicly what I think that is. It's always better to, under-promise and over-deliver, and that's, I guess, the avenue I'll take with that figure tonight. But I'm comfortable in telling you that I believe the figure there will only get better as we move through this fiscal year. The Mayor and Council's budget has been increased a bit this year to account for acquisition of an air card, if you all choose to do that. City Manager's budget, we've shows an increase, and I've said this before, it looks like I'm the only one that is showing an increase and everybody else is showing a decrease. And you may look at me and say, well, what's wrong with that picture? The reason that has occurred is we have reallocated how we spread out the costs so that the costs of what we are actually doing day to day matches the budget, and that is simply what that is. It's not that there has been an exorbitant increase in staff. As a matter of fact, there has not been, but it's just a realigning of particularly people, which cost money in the area in which they should be accounted for. The clerk's budget, as well as the finance budget, not much change over last year, other than it just represents actuals. We'll get into some of those specifics here in a minute. The budget for legal services, we put in at $200,000. That does represent an increase. Your city attorney and I, even though we serve different roles, we're both very aware that Milton operates on a budget, and we do what we can to stay within that budget. I've got to tell you that there's several things that happen in a legal budget that you really can't plan for. A couple of those are ongoing as we speak. We will, I believe, probably too soon to say because I haven't seen the last bill, but I believe we will stay within budget this year. I'm anticipating that we will. Anytime that we enter into any type of litigation, whether it's against us or whether it's us against somebody, those are really unforeseen issues, and we certainly have to defend ourselves when we are sued, and sometimes that has a detriment on the budget when it comes to keeping within a certain dollar figure because we just can't anticipate a lot of that kind of stuff. particularly the ones that you are aware of that I won't go into here in the public forum. Information and technology. We have employed an IT director as a city employee. That person is here, and that person will be helping to assist us with a transition of our IT from CH2M Hill to the city services. He's already making a lot of steps in that direction, but that is kind of one update in IT that is moving forward. Human resources is something else that we take over as a city function this year. Whether or not we had elected to move away from the CH2M Hill contract, this was still something that I believe was best to be brought in-house, simply because the service that unit or department provides really is provided to our city employees. And I can tell you that that's what the budget is for this year, is to bring the human resource department in-house. I'm pleased to tell you that there are several very qualified candidates. We interviewed 10 candidates almost 2 weeks ago and re-interviewed our top 3 today. And I look forward to making a decision and moving forward with the human resource person very soon. But I can tell you that the caliber of people that we interviewed today is tremendous. Public Information and Marketing, we elected to change the name a little bit. That really doesn't mean that it necessarily changed. We changed that simply to represent exactly what they were doing. It's always nice to call a duck, and that's really what we did with changing the title of that particular department, although you are very aware as to what those 2 positions really do for the city, and it's not that we're creating new, we're just calling the duck. We did see a change this year in the public safety department in the way it was budgeted. In previous years, you would have seen a police, a fire, a public safety administration, as well as an EMS budget. That has changed this year with the breaking apart of both the police and fire department. Now there's only 3 lines, a police line, a fire budget, as well as an EMS budget. EMS is real simple. That's that subsidy that we agreed to some time ago by contract for rural metro ambulance, and that is a fixed cost, so that was very easy to budget for. You will see a slight increase in police and fire if you were to compare them to last year, but I want to make sure you're comparing apples to apples. And what you see with that increase is the breaking apart of the public safety admin. So, yes, both police and fire show somewhat of an increase, but if you total police, fire, and public safety admin from last year, and then total police and fire this year, you'll actually see a slight decrease in the maintenance and operating budget. Police department and fire department, there are a couple of initiatives that I'm going to get into initiatives separately here in just a minute, but a couple of initiative requests in both those departments. Public Works, largely from a staffing perspective, has remained the same with a couple of requests for initiatives. Parks and Recreation is something that we will take over beginning October the 1st as a city position. And we're working through the placement of somebody in that department right now. Community Development is a department that really this year over last year sees a similar, actually somewhat of a decreased level of staffing. But as far as any initiatives in community development, there have not been any directly tied to community development that have been brought forward in this particular budget. Let me talk about initiatives and then capital requests real quick, just so you have a concept of how this worked. When Stacy and I met with the department heads, we collected maintenance and operating requests, or those requests that were needed to be able to continue to operate the city of Milton in the same or better manner than it was operating today. To give you some idea, a fuel budget in the public safety department, if we can't put gas in the cars, we can't get to the call. Those types of things are maintenance and operating expenses of the city. We went through a fairly rigorous and thorough process with the department heads if they wanted to bring forward anything that would be considered a new initiative. A new initiative to the extent that I received new initiative requests from our staff in the amount of $1,995,566. There was a sheet that looked something like this, and I brought it with me just to show you how long the sheet was of maintenance and operating initiative requests that came in from our department heads. That's a great a great sheet, and maybe at some point in my career I will be somewhere where there's just more money to give out than there is projects that people can even come up with. Although I haven't been that lucky yet, and probably will be a while before we're in that type of a situation. So what we really did was attack these initiatives from safety perspective. Number one, are we enhancing either the safety of our employee or the safety of our citizen? And we looked at those items first, and then looked at what was the right thing to do for our citizens. At the end of the day, and after thoroughly going through these initiatives line item by line item, initially what started as $1.9 million in requests from the employees, I whittled that list down to $429,000. Is $429,870, and that's what's included in this budget. Took $2 million and cut it basically just less than 25%, based on that number one priority, which was safety to either our staff or our citizens. To go through some of those items with you so you have an understanding of what they are. A couple in information and technology. A network bandwidth, and this completely ties into our public safety department and allows them to get the information that they need in the field to be able to respond to calls for service at $32,500. And now I'm going to mention one, but it was one that is just in keeping with a good sense of doing business with the city, and that was to extend the warranty on some of the laptop computers that we have in our police department. Just a purely financial decision. It's much cheaper to extend the warranty than it was to go out and buy new computers or to be self-funded if a computer broke. We were talking $8,000 in that initiative, and that was one that was just purely a financial decision to fund. Getting into the police department, I can tell you, as I've had some responsibility for the police department for a couple of years now with the city of Milton, we designed and built the police department based on the data that we had at the time that we designed that police department. We had data from Fulton County. We had census data that showed we had 15,000 plus or minus citizens in the city of Milton. Oh, I'm not going to be able to read off of two things at the same time. Okay. 15 plus or minus thousand citizens. We had data from Fulton County. We put all that together and we put it into this wonderful formulas that exist about professional police staffing, and we came up with a number, and we now have real data, and that number's just not sufficient to service the citizens and the needs of the city of Milton. We now have actual call data. We have a number of requests. We have requests for community outreach. Frankly, we have a police department that in days like today, and today's an exception because today's just one of those crazy days in public safety, but on a fairly regular basis, we go down to very limited staffing in the police department. And you might say, well, we see them driving around all over the place, and that sometimes is good, because if we can be seen everywhere with only 4 people out there at any one time, that means we must be doing a decent job of getting out there. But the data really actually shows that we are that we really could stand to add 6 people to our police department, and there would be plenty of work for them to do. That, again, is just not something I can come to you in one year and say, you know, Mayor and Council, everybody else is shrinking their staff and everybody else is cutting expenses way beyond what they have in the past, and oh, by the way, I want to grow the police department by 6 people. And that's when you'll look at me kind of funny and say, you know, how's this working? I do believe, though, I do strongly believe that even in this economy, with our budget as it exists today, we have a duty to not only our police officers, because they're only as good in some circumstances, some calls they go on, as the help that they receive when they're there, but we also owe it to our citizens to make sure that our response times don't slow and that we are providing them a good level of service. Of the 6 that were requested, okay, I was about to say, y'all changed this on me since last week. Okay. What I agreed to put in this budget to present to you tonight was the addition of 2. And that's what is being brought forward tonight at a cost of $159,971. Additionally, as Councilmember Tart spoke about earlier tonight, we have a need. We have a desperate need for somebody to provide crime prevention type services And that could be a whole other couple-hour discussion as to what they're capable of. They do amazing stuff. Crime prevention officers do amazing stuff. They're that person that comes in a police uniform and does stuff that you don't typically associate with first-level calls for service. Now, that's not to say we can't accomplish some of those things within the confines of the day-to-day operations, but what we are finding is that our police officers are remaining so busy going call to call that it's terribly difficult, and I had to do this at one point in my career, to commit to all sorts of different community events with a caveat that I'll be there until I have to leave. And what happens is you do that enough, and all of a sudden you leave more frequently than you stay somewhere because the call volume just dictates that. And you almost end up with a negative image that, well, they committed to my birthday party, or they committed to my neighborhood watch meeting, or they committed to all this wonderful stuff that we have every intention on doing, that we just don't show up at any of it. I believe the need is there. Our police department believes the need is there. And one of the things that I'm bringing forward tonight is a request that you fund a crime prevention officer in the police department. One more personnel request, and then we're done with personnel requests for this year. This is what I truly believe, a cost neutral, if not a possibility within the guidelines that we have to operate under, is potentially a revenue positive contribution to the city of Milton, as well as somebody that can actually do some real good work in a police department. And that is actually this year to staff the narcotics officer position that we talked about last year. We've had an opportunity to do some really good research to kind of see where our break-even points were there. And I'm more comfortable this year, having done that research, to say, let's go ahead and do that. Last year, I thought I knew what the data was going to tell me. Was close to knowing what the data was going to tell me. This year, I've got actual data, and it's a lot easier to make decisions on actual data than what I think the data is going to tell me. We have that actual this year, and I'm more comfortable recommending that you allow that funding so that we could staff that position. In the fire department, really a couple of things that we looked at, and again, these really are keyed in on either safety of the citizens or safety of our staff. The first, safety of our citizens, which is to continue to pursue and enhance the Heart Ready City that we've had good feedback on thus far. The second item is one that we applied for in grant funding, although we have been turned down in grant funding, and I don't know now where my stuff is here. There it is. There's the one I'm looking for. We've applied for the other two items in the fire department, both through grants, and I want to make sure I tell you the right one. There's one in there for 4 exhaust extractor system for the fire bays, and if you have any questions about it, the technicalities of that, Chief Edgar's here. He can certainly provide that. That one still may be grant funded. So that one, if you like to fund that tonight, we will wait and see if we are awarded a grant. We also did apply with a grant for the rescue harnesses for our firefighters to be used in case they get trapped somewhere. That one has not been funded by a grant, and I can tell you that was turned down. That's at $13,225. A couple of things in Public Works tonight. One is a partnership to continue to allow our citizens to use a recycling center. I believe that's important at $50,000. And we did fund or have presented to you tonight in our budget for your consideration the ability to fund $5,000 in some type of another volunteer cleanup day in fiscal year 2010. We had great success in the one that we did this year. I think there's an opportunity to capitalize on that community spirit, community, just that sense of community. We need more of that, especially in this economic time. We need people to get together and feel as though Milton is a home, and this is where they come to do that kind of a thing. And that
recycling center at Trosville's.
That's correct. Yep. So $5,000, and again, that might not be something that we need. There will be some advertising that goes along with that, as well as some general supply costs for a cleanup type event. I think it's one that is worthy of our consideration, as well as put in some funding for some additional overhead trimming of trees. We have trees that grow over our right-of-way. That's just one of those general things. Again, another safety perspective, that it keeps the site distance decent in the rights-of-way, but something that we need to just make sure we maintain our city. in a manner that, number one, is safe, and number two, is aesthetically pleasing as we can keep it. There were several other operating initiative requests that we were able to find funding for in other manners, whether or not it was in the general fund and just misunderstood by the staff that was putting in the request, or whether we were able to really call it more of a maintenance and operating expenditure than a new initiative. Some of it was just to continue what we were doing this previous year, so we were able to include that in the budget. That's how we went through the initiative requests. Capital requests, if you remember the requests that I had in the initiative account was right at $2 million. The capital request that I had in this fiscal year was right at $4.324 million. Obviously, to be presented with roughly $6 million worth of requests and have much less than that to figure out how to fund, again, we took the capital requests and said, okay, what's either mandated by law, number one, or number two, what is a safety issue to our citizens or our staff, and that was how we prioritized funding or bringing a recommendation forward for your funding. We elected to continue a pavement management program by including funding in that, continuing to fund the restriping of roads, traffic calming measures, and to continue to fund the NPDES permit compliance program, which I spoke about when we were having the public hearing. We've got an interesting set of circumstances this year in that we will likely have 2 bridges that need replacing. I think both of them are still at least above water at this point. One is Cogburn Road and one is Landrum Road, and that is in the budget at $675,000. Something else that I know there were some questions about, which I'll talk about, is the acquisition of a 5th piece of fire apparatus. Now, let me tell you why this is important and why this made it in my opinion. We have an aging fleet. And it's weird to say that. We've only not even been around 3 years to sit here and say we have an aging fleet. But we have now a fleet in both police and fire, and I knew we were going to get there, that is out of warranty. And that happens. Anything mechanical goes out of warranty. And we're there. We're there on all 4 pieces of fire equipment. Probably still there on some of the police cars, but not most. What happens with an aging fleet is things have the potential to go out of service. At this point, if we bring one of our pieces of fire apparatus out of service, we are, for all intents and purposes, 1 unit out of service. We don't have anything else that we can put anybody in other than to put them potentially in a pickup truck, but the pickup truck that we have at our disposal doesn't carry around the stuff that's necessary to fight fires. It doesn't have a tank in it, doesn't have a pump in it. So we are, for all intents and purposes, when a unit goes out of service, we are out of service with that unit. Even if the unit doesn't go out of service, routine maintenance, as you might imagine on a fire truck, is not quite as simple as driving to the express oil change and getting a 10-minute oil change in a car. Even when we bring the people in to do maintenance on the fire apparatus, it takes some time, and that time that it takes is time that we're out of service. I'd like to do a couple of different things. One is I would like to start to spread out our fleet to some extent so that it doesn't all go out of service at the same time. That will be a long-term risk for us if we don't start to diversify when things come and go from in service and out of service. There was a question about a used fire truck, and I want to talk about a used fire truck. That's just not something that's easy to find. People just don't sell a 2 or 3-year-old fire truck that still has any use to it. You know, when people use their fire trucks for 10, 15 years, and then when you might find one that you could purchase, you're more purchasing something as a parade piece or as a piece of memorabilia, but you're not really purchasing something that is ready or capable to go out and fight a fire. Number 2 is that to buy something used, especially that type of an asset, it would come with no warranty, and I want us to be ever cautious that we're not in one of those circumstances where we don't do the right thing now that ends up costing us more in the long run. I can tell you that the comments that were asked about the fire truck and about a used fire truck, those are great questions, and they made us go back to the manufacturer and say, let's just say, for example, we wanted to do this and we wanted to do it cheaper, but we still wanted the added benefit of having a piece of apparatus that's under warranty, that's very similar to the ones we have, so that it's very easy to move between pieces of apparatus. That's important too in an emergency. is that you're consistent in your deployment of equipment. And we do have an opportunity, if that's something that you would like to fund. There are some trucks that are always on the construction line that are being built as demos. Those come at a lesser cost than going and doing one completely from scratch and building what you want from the ground up. There's a couple of those that are in the line that have some cost savings attached to them. That might be the best solution for the city of Milton, to be able to buy something at a lesser cost, but something that still is going to be delivered to the city of Milton, that has a warranty that goes along with it, and something that can move into our fleet and not be something that would just be an anomaly to us, but something that the firefighters very easily could go from one to the other without any issues. If you have any more questions about that, Chief Edgar, again, is ready to answer exactly what he's found in doing that research. Also in health and safety mitigation is the Birmingham and Providence intersection improvement, the third-year funding, as well as Arnold Mill and New Providence. Carter's been out putting up barricades all day, so he probably looks a little waterlogged there in the audience, but he's made it in, and he can tell you exactly where those projects are. If you have interest, it does look as though they're moving forward, but I'll let him speak to that if you have any specific questions. As well as in the other account, some overhead imagery for community development as well as public safety. And this was, again, a purely financial decision, one of the couple that were just purely financial. We have an opportunity to enhance our level of service with this enhanced technology, and we have kind of an opportunity right now to do it along with the other North Fulton cities in a collaborative type environment, where if we were to go solo, this would cost us a lot more than it does when we start to partner on a regional level, where we can get the benefit of going into purchasing these flyovers with other North Fulton cities, and thereby decreasing the costs of what ultimately it's a much cheaper cost for a much better product. As well as if you, in fact, approve the police positions, the funding is there for the vehicles that they would need to be able to operate in the first-year funding. The one thing that I talked about a couple meetings ago, I'll talk to again tonight. And the reason I went into more detail about some of the initiative requests and capital requests and some of the hand we were dealt this year was a bit interesting. It's a bit interesting to go out and start your MPDES stuff and realize you have twice as many stormwater structures as you thought you had. It's interesting to go out there and say, okay, we've got a bridge inspection that's going to warrant a bridge being repaired. We've had some pretty big needs this year, and I think hopefully I presented those to you tonight. What our needs are. This budget isn't one of those things that I could just say, let's fund all this stuff that we truly, in my opinion, we need at this point in the city of Milton to continue to operate safely for both our staff and our citizens, without looking at where in the capital budget or where somewhere in the budget could we appropriate money from that might be considered less of a priority than some of the priorities we came up with this year. I want to draw your attention, and many folks miss this, and I'm sure that the 70 of you are not those folks, but for the benefit of the public, we have three particular lines in the capital budget that really could, for all intents and purposes, be brought into one line. They are very similar type line items. One is called Parks Improvement, one is called Land Acquisition and Park Enhancement. Those two specifically, I don't know why those are in two different lines. As well as Milton Trails. Now, I know that has a definite specific use, so maybe even the first two. We often refer to the fact that we have $1.2 million in land acquisition and park enhancement. In fact, we almost have $1.5 million when you start to put these lines together as to what their use would be. In order to have this budget that's being presented to you tonight balance, we did reappropriate $500,000 from those combined lines, and what that does is instead of there being roughly $1.5 million left jointly between those two lines, it leaves $1,006,429. So it still does leave $1 million in that particular area. And very honestly, I think that that's something that obviously it would have to go through our budget amendment process this year. But that's one of those things that, with the council's direction and the council's guidance, any of these places that I'm just not strong enough tonight to say, hey, I think there's $100,000 in this line where the CH2M Hill contract might get cheaper, or I think it's $200,000, or I think it's whatever it might be. There would be ways to reappropriate if the council wants to reappropriate that money at a future time in a future budget amendment. Conversely, if it's the will of the council not to remove that $500,000 from the land acquisition and park enhancement line in those two joint items, where I would look at to start to cut back expenses, obviously, is the operating initiatives that were presented tonight, simply because those are what I consider to be enhancements over this year. That there's $429,870 worth of requests and operating initiatives. If you all tell me tonight that Chris removing $500,000 from that particular line and leaving $1 million is not appropriate, then that gives me direction on where I would recommend to you that we go back and look and take that money from. In either circumstance, I'm here tonight to tell you that we can continue to operate the city. I just think we have the opportunity to not only leave money in the parks line and the parks enhancement line, land acquisition. We have an opportunity to leave money there, and a good chunk of money. But I also think we have the opportunity to even in this economy, bring our level of service to our citizens up a notch. I certainly am ready and poised to answer questions. We have every critical staff member that you might need here tonight has stayed with us to answer your questions on a department level. If you have any technical questions about their requests, what I might do here quickly is turn it over to Stacy, just because she has captured every question you asked at the workshop. Let her methodically go through those and answer those questions. And then after that, we'll take whatever new questions come up. Is that, Mayor, is that okay to you? Is that an okay format? Okay.
Okay, I went through, if you recall, I've lost the microphone here. If you recall at the council work session, I went through department by department. Does that work? Works a little bit better. We had a question by Councilmember Tart, who asked about the stipend for the air cards and what the actuals look like. And I went through, there's only 2 council members that have actually turned in expenditures for that. So if you feel that we need to decrease those line items by $720 each, we can certainly do that. That's one area that you can cut if you need to. In risk management, Councilmember Lusk asked about if there was a need for extended liability, and the city manager and I met with one of the citizens of Milton that you pointed us to. Thank you very much for pointing us in her direction. She has been fabulous to work with, and she's helped us understand a lot about the liability policies that we do have. And as it stands right now, the policies that we have are sufficient for the city of Milton and carrying us forward in the transition. We will be looking at some new avenues, I guess new direction there as far as what is best for the city with her guidance. So we are looking into that right now. Councilmember Zonner Bailey asked if we had enough money in the budget for the Highway 9 design guidelines.
I think what we're talking about there is, oh goodness, now I'm really loud. Where's Sadiq? You're fired. You're fired. All right, no, I'm just kidding. The Highway 9, I've always wanted to say that. That was fun. The Highway 9 design.
Think so.
The Highway 9 design guidelines, or the committee that's tasked with the Highway 9 overlay. We went back and looked at the history of that. And what I have back in there for funding right now is what you would see in the budget today if you looked at it. And in 2009, that is correct. And that's where I started, because going back previous years, I wanted to at least bring it back to a level of funding that if you were to go to the budget today, was determined by the council last year to be sufficient. Now, that's something that we could look at As well, I had the opportunity to meet with the Highway 9 Design Overlay Committee, and they have some great ideas. We talked about what was appropriate funding in there. And $15,000 at least gets us back to whole where we are today, and I committed to them that night that I would find a way. We had a couple of different options. One was to try to move that money into a capital projects fund so that it would continue project length or continue into fiscal 10. We missed all the advertising deadlines to do that, and that was just more difficult than it might be worth. So what I committed to them I would do would be to allow that money, that unspent money at this point, to roll into the unallocated fund balance that it rolls into for fiscal year 10, and see if the council would be willing to reappropriate it in this fiscal year at $15,000. If you think that number needs to be different, again, that's the purpose of the discussion tonight, but I want you to know that it is in the budget at this point as though it is what you would see today if you were to look at the budget. That money continues to fund, and if you approve this budget tonight, will be there for funding. And that doesn't mean that if they were to spend that $15,000 and later in the year come up with an amazing, compelling reason as to why there would be a need for additional money in there, that we couldn't, based on the circumstances that we had at that point in the fiscal year, look at where we could potentially see where we are less spent than we might have expected we would be. And there's a lot of variables when it comes to putting together one of these budgets. The biggest one that we had in fiscal year 2009 was the fuel budget, because fuel was exorbitant when we budgeted and it has since come down in cost. We might have another one of those situations play out for us in mid-year, that if they do something and need more, we could bring back to the council and find out what your pleasure is to whether or not you might want to allocate more money into that project. But as it stands today, there should be the same amount, if you approve this budget, the same amount that is there today would be in there beginning October the 1st.
Mr. Yeah, I was going to say, how do you want us to go? Do you want us to address things as you identify these items?
How many more questions do you have to? We've got. Can we answer two more questions? Then we're wide open.
Councilmember Thurman asked if we, asked about the LCI applications and what that cost was for. And I spoke with Tom Wilson. He said it is for outsourcing the writing of the applications for the LCIs.
I'm sorry, you said it was to write the LCIs?
I'm sorry, I just confirmed with Michelle McIntosh Ross, who deals with all the comprehensive planning and LCI applications. Actually, Michelle did do an application last year. We can do the application in-house if that's so is your desire to pursue that. And the $20,000 is the allotment for the matching fund, which I believe is a 2080 matching fund.
So that would be if we were allocated the LCI.
Correct. If we were approved. Last year we were turned down. So.
What's the timing for that?
I believe that the application is due around November or December, and then there's a result in March, April of next year.
So the intent is to do another one for crabapple and
no, we would. Well, I think
9?
last year that she applied for both crabapple and Highway 9, and they both were denied. From what I saw, there was a recommendation from the ARC that there's kind of like a super corridor area that they'd like to see some planning done, and an edge of the Highway 9 of our jurisdiction does lie in that area. So that is a possibility. That would be our strongest suit, is to go toward the Highway 9 application. But again, it's up to, I guess, up to y'all what you would like to see to be done.
Well, in that case, that's actually in the wrong area. It should be in the capital grant fund. So we would need to move that to the capital grant fund. Councilmember Thurman also asked about the Arnold Mill corridor study and if it was a placeholder.
Yeah, I can jump in and take that one too. Yes, I believe it is. That was money that was put in at some point in the past, and we've left it in there. Since we have such a short segment, I hate to say, of Arnold Mill Road, when we get ready to move forward with the planning for that particular road, it's going to require some great cooperation between Cherokee County and the city of Roswell. And when that road gets ready to, at this point with all the funding being put on hold, there was not any massive need to think that that was happening sooner rather than later. So in answer to you whether or not it's a placeholder, yes, but at some point that project is going to move forward, and it's largely depending on GDOT funding. So I would hate to not have it there as a placeholder and miss the boat, because we need to obviously have a seat at that table when that road gets, when the planning process for that particular area starts.
And that funding wouldn't have to be road-specific. I mean, it could also tie to a master plan for
That
road
is correct.
activities that are correct.
That is correct. Okay. Mayor, I'll turn it over to you. That's a staff presentation again. Your staff is here tonight to help answer any questions that you have about the budget. And I'll let the mayor facilitate how we want to get that done.
Okay. And first, I'd just like to say thank you to our staff, Chris and Stacy and all our staff. They've worked very hard. A lot of what the explanation and Chris was going on is more for the public than us in some way, because I know myself, I've met with them and have heard all this many times and went over it, as well as the council. The council has also had plenty of opportunity, both with the workshop and then time to email and get questions into staff and get answers. So again, I just want to let everybody know this isn't just something that we sit here right now and listen through a little short presentation. There's a lot that's gone on. So again, if there's not many questions, it's because there's been so much time spent on it, and council has had ample time to get with our staff and get their questions answered, and staff can make adjustments and whatnot. So at this point, what I'll probably do is just start at one end. Maybe I'll start at Councilmember Tart's end, and we'll go through. And if anybody's got any further questions or didn't get answers on something they had submitted, just give everybody a few minutes to do.
I have no questions. Thank you for answering the ones that I had up until now.
Thank you for answering my questions. I do have a question that's related to the budget with regard to the Parks and Rec Director, since it's public knowledge that you advertised and closed the receiving resumes for that position. Have you determined someone for that position?
Have not determined somebody from that position yet. Yes, you are absolutely correct. The resumes have been received. They have been cataloged. They have been gone through for the purpose of meeting the minimum criteria as well as our preferred criteria of the advertisement. We had almost 75 applications for that particular position. I've got to tell you that I have spent the bulk of my time in employee placement right now with the human resource function. And Parks and Rec is next. Unfortunately, there are only so many hours in the day to do interviews. I've got to tell you, in looking at the Parks and Rec Director spreadsheet, when I looked at it, and I kind of go through and figure out, okay, where do I start to pare 75 down? Because none of us have time to talk to 75 people. There's a lot of very talented people on paper. And I say on paper because I've been through that before, where they look talented on paper and you talk to them and you say, wow, how'd that happen? I say that just to say that it will be about as difficult, I believe, as a process of finding the right HR person. It is the priority for staffing immediately following the HR placement.
Bill?
Yes, sir. Question for Chief Edgar regarding the appropriation for a new engine. Does that budget include outfitting it completely?
Well, when I put the budget together, what I did is I provided a range, anywhere from $480,000 all the way up to $600,000. And what that did is gave us an opportunity to place equipment on that truck. So if we wanted to just buy the truck as is, we could probably buy one. And what I found, as Mr. Lagerblum was saying, demos and spec trucks that are out there that were used at trade shows and such that are available anywhere from $380,000 all the way up to $600,000. So we could simply buy one of those, and then in the event we need to put it in service, we would have to transfer equipment from one truck to another to put that unit in service. So my recommendation would be, let's buy the larger items such as the hose and the ladders, so we don't have to, it would take hours to move all that equipment. And then take some of the smaller hand tools and equipment and personal equipment and transfer those. That would certainly keep the cost down.
Good deal. Another question. Where would we berth this additional vehicle? Is there enough room at 41 or 43 to berth it?
Yes, Station 41 and 43 has enough room to house this station. That's correct.
Why isn't it we're not putting the Quint on site? Is it because we're making it more available to the Deerfield area?
Well, here I'm going to jump in like I got a fire chief standing here, and I'm going to jump in and talk about fire apparatus placement. Go ahead, chief.
Well, one of the benefits of the automatic aid agreement was having an additional aerial apparatus in the city. Alpharetta was able to place one. They had one at Station 1, but they only had one. We had one, so it was a better fit to place our Quint in Station 1, and that gave them the opportunity to move theirs further south within the city, which balanced out the ladder or the aerial apparatus between the two cities.
That's what's called cooperation.
Yes, and it's worked out quite well. So.
Let me just step in for 1 second, just share a little personal story how it's worked out well. The other day, our house got struck by lightning and knocked the alarm off, and then a little bit later my wife called and said that she saw smoke coming out of the bedroom. So she was freaking out. I said, well, did you call 911? She said, yep. So a few minutes later I called back and I heard everything going on, the fire truck's there, and she said a big white fire truck just pulled right up. So the Alpharetta fire truck got to my house before the Milton, but I say that in all sincerity that this mutual aid has worked out good, because I know there's a lot of times that the Milton guys get to a scene first, whether it's in Alpharetta or whatever, or vice versa. But this is a good thing. I was firsthand experience that Alpharetta stepped up, and they must have been closer, because then the Milton fire engines got there later. But anyway, so that has worked out real well.
Yes, it has. It's provided great training opportunities for both departments to work as one. So.
Thank you, Mayor. And thanks. I know the staff has worked very hard, and obviously a lot of us have had questions, but that's what a budget's all about. I want to thank you, Chief Edgar, for going back and looking at those demo costs and how we might be able to reduce those. It sounds like we're not going to resolve this evening as to whether or not a demo might be a great option. I would just ask that we keep that. It sounds like we will keep that as an open option, just because obviously that's such a sizable amount of money. And I know that you, Chief, are quite sensitive to that from a budgetary perspective. So I'll look forward to just continuing dialogue on that. I did want to mention, Chris, on the recycling center, and I know that you were trying to keep connections with where you were for training. When we talked about that Roswell Center, we said that we thought that could come in significantly less. And I'm just going to assume on all of these, but I'll say it out loud since we're in a different place than we were a year ago with the budget, is that I think we now have, and especially as we move forward in this transition, and you managing all these departments, that even though tonight we might have approvals, it's not a presumption that those dollars will need to be expended. I know perhaps in the past with other folks that may or may not be here any longer, that sometimes when that budget was there, it was presumed, we've got the money, let's spend it. And you opened this discussion with that, but before we bring closure to this tonight, I'm hoping that we're all concurring that if there are opportunities within each of these segments of budget, we will indeed look to reduce those and reallocate them. I mean, does that go without saying?
Yes, absolutely.
In terms of storm, water, and storm management initiatives, a concern I have, and obviously with the flooding that we've had over the last week, and this is something that we've talked about in the past, that it's not one of those sexy line items, but I think that this is a week where we can see evidence that indeed we need to be thinking about how we invest in our storm water management system. And I guess my question just for you and for Mr. Lucas is, do we think that we've got enough out there? I know in the past when we've talked about it, we've said, gee, it's one of those things that we'd want to fund. It's not a sexy budget item, but tonight in the last few days we see the need for that. And just as we think about as funds become available, in addition to looking to reallocate this back to our parkland, my request would be that we look long and hard about what we need to do to ensure that we have adequate funds assigned for storm water management throughout Milton. And I don't know if we could just speak to that briefly.
Want me to take that one?
Sure.
Hey, Carter.
And thank you for all your hard work today. I know you've been out and about the city.
Still ongoing.
His hair got curly. I'm sorry, that's a joke.
I know. I've dried off a little bit. From a stormwater management perspective, there aren't any specific projects identified at this point. Part of the NPDS program is to do a proactive evaluation of your storm sewer system. And so what we're anticipating is, as we went through this initial evaluation of about 2,000 structures is what we're looking at this year, we anticipated that there would be a capital improvement program developed from that. We would begin to find projects and problems out there that needed to be addressed. And so towards the end of the year, as we get to the end of that inventory, right now what we've seen so far is that things are in pretty good shape, but we do have a lot of new stormwater systems. So as we get to the older systems, we anticipate finding those towards the end of the year and into next year as the inventory continues. So essentially what we're doing at this point is we're budgeting for that capital program, but no, there haven't been specific projects identified other than the bridge projects that we have in this year's capital budget.
I'm just assuming that right now we may find that we identify some issues that we haven't yet, and because of a time frame, we may find that over the next couple of weeks, if the weather continues, that we may identify some things that we hadn't previously taken note of.
Well, we have some that occurred today that will need to be addressed. And as the water recedes and we can evaluate some of the impacts that the storm has had, there may be others.
Okay, so I just would ask if we can make that a priority. I'd truly appreciate that. One thing that we had talked about in the legal budget, and I'd asked this question, and I think probably you guys went back and looked at it, but just based on the line items that are out there for things that we know of, because I know that we now categorize by section, do you feel comfortable that we have enough allocated to cover those?
Councilmembers on Bailey, I do at this point. I'm optimistic that we're going to come in within budget this year, and we'll make a concerted effort to do so next year. Absent something unforeseen, which knock on wood we hope does not occur, new litigation that we don't need, we'll be fine.
Okay. Intersection improvements, we didn't talk about that, but can we just quickly confirm, because it's a question we often get, and that the Birmingham intersection is still funded for our apportionment, as is the Arnold Mill Providence?
Both of them are funded. What we have word from GDOT as of last week, where there were some funding issues on their end that had to go back to Federal Highway to get approved. They anticipated having that approval back in 3 to 4 weeks, which at that point would have been beginning of October, at which point they would issue us a notice to proceed on that.
Okay, terrific.
On both of those projects.
What does that mean by notice to proceed? That's with engineering?
That's with our preliminary engineering. In a project like that, by the time you get through preliminary engineering, your environmental studies and right-of-way acquisition can take 2 to 3 years or more. So it's not something that will be in place right away, but it will be something we begin the engineering on as soon as we get that notice to proceed.
And once we do, it'd be a great thing to be able to communicate proactively, because it's just one of those recurring questions. And along those same lines, there have been a lot of questions asked with the new Birmingham Falls Elementary School, and this was not a question I had the opportunity last week to talk about. Just a question. I know that there's been questions I've received in the last week, because that is still not funded by GDOT, and I know that we still have police officers that go out there either just when they're in the area to make sure that that's a safe entryway, both going and coming. There's been questions as to whether or not GDOT is prepared to do something to help with that, and I just don't know if it's a GDOT road, so I don't know if that's something that we need to consider.
As far as marking the school zone?
Well, marking the school zone both with signs, and then whether or not, depending on what we see over the next period of time, if there's anything more that we would need to do to either influence them, or if we need to have any funding that would help the safety for that school entrance.
We've made a formal request for that school zone to be signed, and they're moving forward with that. I don't have a time frame on that right now, but
that's proceeding.
That is in process, and we will continue to coordinate that with them.
Wonderful. Thank you. Just my last thought would be with regards to reserves, and as we move through an approval for a budget, potentially this evening, when we look at those priorities in terms of when we find additional cost savings, are we going to concur this evening, or have as part of our potential discussion how those items would then fare in terms of reallocating those funds back to the parkland acquisition, making sure that we have additional dollars for storm water management, and then thirdly, as an example, making sure that we're allocating dollars into the reserves? Can you maybe just speak about how we would formally make sure that those priorities are indeed identified?
It's actually a pretty formal process, because in order to deviate from the budget as it's presented tonight and to reallocate anything anywhere, I've got to bring that budget back to you all for approval. So I could come back with a recommendation of how we want to reappropriate money if we have extra in places, or if we do a mid-year budget adjustment, which I will be the first to tell you all this year, that there is really no way to affect this transition without anticipating a budget amendment at some point during this fiscal year. It's just not possible. Right now I have an item budgeted in a line item contract, and if that contract doesn't exist for the whole year, at some point I've got to break that up into departments and have it reappropriated. So long story short, yes, formally, because it is a very formal process, and ultimately the majority of the 7 of you will have the authority to tell me how to do that.
But we'll come back through this process as you've just described.
Yep.
And obviously, we've talked about parkland, and hopefully some of these other items that we've talked about would be at the top of that list.
If I'm doing my job right, which I hope, at least at this point I am, I kind of have in my head what your priorities are. I think that's a good thing.
Right.
And I think I should be working along the line of your priorities. And I hear loud and clear what the priorities are, so I would venture to say that when I bring that request back to you, it's going to try to be as close to in line with your priorities as I can make it.
Thank you so much.
Bill, you have one more question?
One more for Carter, if he doesn't mind. It's, if I might digress a little bit, it's not budget related, but I think it's timely, given the intensity and the duration and the how the storm has prolonged here for the last week or so, particularly as it relates to bridges, Landrum Road, Cockburn Road, and more than likely other bridges throughout the city. Is there any consideration to going out and spot checking abutments on these bridges, trying to determine if there's any washout or if there's any severe damage to them?
Absolutely. One of the things we'll be doing as the water recedes is going back and trying to look at some of those, particularly the ones, we've got a number of bridges that have wooden abutments. We've tried to look at those today. They've just been completely overwhelmed, so we really haven't been able to evaluate them. But as that water drops down, we will be going back and trying to make a cursory evaluation from our standpoint. Sure. And if we think we need to bring in the experts on the bridges, we'll make a proposal to do that.
Do we think there's enough reserve funding in there to take care of emergency situations?
Sure. That's just one of the things about operating the city. Yep, that's one of the things about a budget is we'll certainly things change, and if that's something that changes to maintain the safety, health, and welfare of our citizens, we will modify the budgets as is appropriate to do those things.
For sure.
Okay. Karen?
Just a couple questions. Number one, crabapple study under Public Works. Is that just the transportation plan for crabapple, or is that the master plan for crabapple, or because I know we were supposed to have had in the budget a master plan for crabapple last year, so just stay up here with us.
The original crabapple study that was included in the budget was a project that was a holdover from Fulton County, and it was a streetscape, landscape, aesthetic type project that was proposed in Fulton County and rolled over.
And that's what the $48,217 is under Public Works crabapple study?
No,
under the
ma'am.
Capital Projects Fund?
I'm sorry, just a second.
Under Public Works crabapple study under the Capital Projects Fund. It's on page 179 of the budget, or page 216 of the disc I had.
Are you talking about the 48,000?
Yes.
I think that's the carryover from the current crabapple study that we are performing under the comprehensive transportation plan.
So is that just transportation related?
Yes, ma'am.
Because it was my understanding we were supposed to have had money in the budget for the crabapple master plan from talking to Alice and Tom, and I wasn't sure where that was, if it was going to be just part of the regular comprehensive plan budget.
That has actually already been spent. It was only $15,000 that was spent. It was a grant that was coming from.
Yeah, but it wasn't spent on that was supposed to just have been part of it. Alice assured me that we had enough to do the complete Crabapple Master Plan. That was just for, a small part of what was of the project.
I believe what's been said is that there may be enough money left over in the comprehensive plan to be able to use that money towards the Crabapple plan.
Okay, but it's not spelled out separately in this. Okay, does this take into account, I know CPAC is working on their recommendations of what they feel like needs to be done. Have we looked at any of their recommendations for the comprehensive plan as far as what initiatives they believe in doing this? Will that just be done with the mid-year budget?
I'm sorry, I was still stuck on Crabapple Plan. Can you say that again? I apologize.
I know CPAC, as part of what they're doing, is putting together a list of what they feel like are their short-term work plan and long-term work plan. Have we even looked at that yet, or will that be just handled with a mid-year budget?
That'll be handled at the mid-year budget. I've not seen any of that information from CPAC at this point to have even considered it for this particular discussion tonight, but when they get ready to provide that, then that's something certainly that we could consider in a mid-year.
Okay. And then you said we'll be moving the money from the $20,000 to the capital grant fund, correct, for LCI stuff?
That's correct.
And I agree. If we need to put all of our efforts in whatever we feel like we have the best chance for. So if Highway 9 is where we have the best chance of getting that grant, then that's what we need to concentrate on. And the last thing is a question I had brought up last time about the credit card fees. And I don't feel like we as a city ought to be paying the credit card fees for those who choose to use their credit card. Fulton County doesn't pay them. They make you pay them when you charge things. Were we able to find out anything on that? Because I believe it was $50,000, $60,000.
I have not been able to find out anything on it yet. I just didn't have enough time to get it together. But whenever I do, that's one of my next priorities once I get through this budget and through the property taxes, or at least the initial billing of them, is to look at that, because I do think that is very forward-thinking and a very good idea.
Okay.
Just along those lines, though, does that mean that we would not be able to apply that? Because part of what we talked about at the work session, I thought, was that we would want to enact potentially that change for current payment, not forward-thinking, but in this current payment period, once those get billed, is that we would want to consider saving those dollars. I thought that was our discussion at the work session.
Was that the general, and I'm sorry that I missed that work session. I can tell you that it was a technology nightmare where I was at. Was that the general feel of the collective body of the council, Mayor, was that we want to move forward and eliminate the city? And I'm certainly fine with that. That should be a fairly easy process. We just have to modify.
It's a lot of money.
We have to modify how we collect credit cards. And that's, I think in today's day and age, we've had this discussion over and over and over again as to whether or not we take checks, whether or not we take credit cards, whether or not we take cash. That we kind of have to. But what of those we do, in fact, take? I think we need to stay in an environment where we accept credit cards. I think we need to stay there. But if it's the wish of the council, we can work at figuring out a mechanism in which the city, where its taxpayers aren't responsible for the fees associated with the credit card purchase.
Especially when it comes
Fair
to
enough.
property tax bills, because that's a pretty
sizable.
Sure,
sizable
understand.
amount. And I think, like said last week, I believe most of the other jurisdictions do pass those charges back on to whoever is using the credit card for their convenience.
Makes perfect sense. It should be a fairly easy process to do.
So along those lines, if we have a motion, or when we make a motion tonight, there's a couple of changes that would need to be made to line items and whatnot, and that would be one of them. Where does that money go, and how do we make that motion?
Well, I think the easiest thing that you could make in the form of a public motion tonight to protect that money would be to make the motion to have that amended and that changed. And at this point, are you comfortable, Ken, with just a motion that moves it into an unallocated line item that to be reallocated by the council at a budget amendment? Is that satisfactory?
I am. I've seen that done multiple. I've seen it done previously.
But do we know what that amount? exactly would be?
I think you would specify the revenue type, or the fee type, and
Not
not
the amount.
necessarily the amount.
So that if we make that shift, we would just allocate those saved funds
Whatever that
into an
is.
unallocated
Correct.
account to later be defined.
The one thing, Council, I want to check. The one thing I want to check before we do that is, just before we jump the gun, is I want to make sure, because all of our fees and all of our taxes and everything else are adopted by the council, that this doesn't require a modification somewhere else. I don't want to make a change in a budget document to then have to come back to you and say, well, that's great, but I went and looked at the fine schedule for the court, for example, and we're going to have to make multiple modifications to accomplish the end goal. And I'm just not positioned tonight that I can do that, because it's the first I've heard of that discussion. I apologize for that, but
What will the process entail in making that change? That's an automated system where they pay by credit card online, so there'll be some changes that have to be made.
I think what's likely going to happen, although here I'm speaking from intuitively. I'm not. I haven't called the credit card company to find out. But I think what's going to happen is that each of the credit card companies that we receive cards from charge a fairly standard percentage based on the fee, and I think it could be accounted for potentially in that percentage would be added to the transaction in the form of a credit card fee, credit card usage fee. So we're actually creating potentially an additional fee. I've got to work through how that works, because now in my brain I've got 2 or 3 different ways we might accomplish the same end goal.
There will be
So,
some sort of a coding change that you'll have.
correct.
online, but, I mean, so it'll take a little bit of time to do it.
Let us work through it and get you a better
Are we better
answer.
off just approving the budget as it is and knowing this is what our desire is, and then we can just make this whenever we make a mid-year budget amendment?
The city attorney just said in my ear that's cleaner. I think we have been perfectly on the record tonight to know what your desires of your staff are. And I can tell you that if you approve the budget as it is tonight, I will bring back something to you to show how we've accomplished this desire.
Yeah, I was going to mention that. If certainly we can give you guys direction to make sure that you go in that direction, and can come back and we can amend. It's always easier to amend when you're adding money.
Yes.
On the
That's a good
outside.
point, Mayor.
So,
Mayor.
I'd like to make a motion to approve an ordinance of the mayor and city council of the city of Milton, Georgia, to adopt the fiscal 2010 budget for each fund of the city of Milton, Georgia, appropriating the amounts shown in each budget as expenditures, adopting the several items of revenue anticipations, prohibiting expenditures to exceed appropriations, and prohibiting expenditures to exceed actual funding available. Agenda item 09-928 with the following change, which is to move the $20,000 relative to the LCI grant to the capital grant fund. Is that correct? Okay.
And I'll second that.
okay, I've got a motion by Councilmember Tartt, second by Councilmember Thurman. Is there any discussion? Hearing none.
All those in favor of the motion, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? That's unanimous.
Okay, moving on
Thank
to
you.
new business. Will the city clerk please sound the aye?
Approval of a memorandum of understanding between the City of Milton and City of Alpharetta for SWAT services, item number 09928. Captain McCarty?
Good evening. This is an agreement between the City of Alpharetta and the City of Milton to establish a joint SWAT team. The City of Alpharetta presently has a SWAT team. It would establish us to provide up to 4 officers to supplement that team. What this does is give the City of Milton access to the whole team at any time that we would need their services. In return, it also allows us to get some additional training for our officers, and just gives us, makes an asset available to us that we cannot sustain ourselves. If you have any questions about that, I'd be more than happy to answer.
I think and also just to follow up on cannot sustain, what he means is that if we were to create our own SWAT team, it would use about 60% of our department, and they are routinely not available at a moment's notice to put together more than 50% of everybody you have. This is certainly another opportunity where the two cities working together, we contribute 4, and in return we get 12, and that's the kind of deal that I like to make, because
Good leverage.
that's wonderful leverage for our city to have.
I have a question just of the composition and the types of things that the SWAT team would be doing. What level you see of need within our city limits? I think Alpharetta has a little bit more crime than we do. But at what level do you see us needing to deploy those services?
In the time that we've been here, and I've been here since the beginning, we've had three occasions where we've needed this type of assistance. And typically there are situations that the patrol level is not really capable of handling, and it's not something that you want them to handle. In my time at Marietta, I spent 4 years on the SWAT team, and national standards dictate that you have a team of 20 people. That's something that we can't accomplish. And with this aspect, it gives us, if we have a situation that arises, we're not spending our time calling around seeing who can help us. We know where our people are coming from, and we know that they're available, and we know that they've trained because they've trained in Alpharetta, they've trained in Milton. So we have these assets available when we need them, and that's very important.
So it's things like lockdowns for schools and hostage situations?
Yes, ma'am. We had since here we had a hostage situation. We've had several situations where we've had a barricaded person, and it just gives us a lot more options to bring a safe resolution.
And being proactive.
Captain, without compromising any confidentiality or procedure, how do you schedule 4 men out of our organization? Are they all on duty at the same time? Are they on call? Or how does that work?
Everybody on this team, including the City of Milton, the City of Alpharetta, this is a part-time responsibility that they take on in addition to their normal duties. Our officers will conduct their normal duties just like they always do. We give them 2 days a month to train specifically for this type of activity, and then they perform everything else on an on-call basis. Just as Alpharetta is not big enough also to be able to afford to have people do this as their primary function. These are all volunteers, police officers that decide to take this extra responsibility.
Well, I think this is great. Another example of shared services and cooperation amongst the cities up here in North Fulton, so I think it's a great thing.
Okay, is there any more questions? Thank you very much. Do I have a motion and a second?
Mr. Mayor, make a motion to approve a memorandum of understanding between the City of Milton and the City of Alpharetta for SWAT services. Agenda item number 09er-9er28.
I'll second the motion.
A motion by Councilmember Lust, second by Councilmember Bailey. Any discussion? Hearing none.
All those in favor of the motion, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? That was unanimous.
Okay, move on to council reports. Are there any reports from council?
I have a quick report.
Sure.
Just to give everybody a quick update, annually, as many of you know, we always have a Rivers Alive event that's all about cleaning up the waterways of Milton. We have that event coming up, and right now it's currently scheduled for October 10th. With these rains, it's always possible that might have to get delayed because if the rivers are too high and dangerous, we wouldn't do it on the 10th. But assuming that the waters recede a bit, we would still be proceeding on October 10th. The alternate date would be the 24th, but Milton Grows Green, Bailey Farm and Gardens, schools, scouts, all of the folks that have been doing this for many, many years, and obviously I've helped to host this for the last, I guess now 13 years, will have involvement from Hopewell, and in fact, Councilmember Tina DeVersa, her Eco Explorers from Hopewell Middle School, along with Beta Club members and scouts and folks of all different sizes and ages, and we'll be working on, and have worked obviously with staff, talking with Jim Seba and with others that we've obviously historically worked with as well, We'll be looking to continue to work on some of the dumps at the parkland, which obviously feed into Little River. We'll also be working on Chicken Creek. Last year, we got thousands of pounds of things out between Chicken Creek, between Richmond Glen and Star Soccer. And then we've got other waterways whereby we are in process of identifying those and making sure that we've got, adequate support from either the homeowners associations, et cetera. So right now, it'll be October 10th, unless something changes. And that'll be from 8 in the morning until about 1, and more information to follow. But we'll have flyers, obviously, in the school, et cetera. So if you have waders, feel free to come and jump in the water and get as much trash out as you can. Yeah, there's plenty, unfortunately, out there. So anybody that wants to jump in a river, we've got plenty of cleanup. So, and it speaks to the opportunity that Chris mentioned, is that we continue to be a community, not just a new city, but continue to be a community that for a very long time has been committed to environmental initiatives, including Rivers Alive. So with that, I hope that more folks will engage and be involved. So thank you.
From council? Okay, let's go to staff reports. City manager?
Just two quick ones tonight, Mayor, because I know we're here late. Number one, obviously today has been a trying day for the staff as it relates to those working outside. Public Works, police, fire, been an interesting day. I can tell you, sometimes we shut roads down and did all that good stuff. Sometimes we wonder why we form some of the units we form and whether or not they have any value. Earlier today, our technical rescue group with the fire department and large animals, I think we're probably up to about 44 horses today rescued in that particular unit, which I didn't think they would get that many in one day, but we have, so that's certainly a good thing. Number two, just want to focus your attention on the weekly reports that you get from Matt Marietta that have to do with the council updates. You'll see a new section at the end of that report if you haven't opened them in a while, or if you did and you didn't catch it. We're going to start to provide you weekly transition updates just so that you're not caught off guard with what is going on related to the transition. So I'll just focus your attention to that report as it relates to us moving through that process. That's what we have, Mayor. Thank you.
Okay. And that's going to conclude this meeting. Do I have a motion we adjourn?
Make a motion to adjourn the meeting.
I'll second it.
A motion by Councilmember Tartt, second by Councilmember Thurman, that we adjourn.
All those in favor of the motion, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? That's unanimous. Meeting adjourned, 9:53.
So, Chris, what's the latest on road closings? Are there